I just got dressed.
I call to order the regular meeting of the Assembly for the Municipality of Anchorage for January 28th, 2014. Mr. Steele, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. Madam Clerk, take the roll, please.
Here.
Present.
Here. 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 Here.
Honored to be here.
Here.
Here. Here, ma'am.
Thank you. And we have no minutes from previous meetings, so Mr. Mayor, you have a report for us?
No report today, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to ask the administration a question, if I could, sir.
Yes.
Of the mayor's comments. Mr. Mayor, can you give us a report on Big Timber Motel now that we own the building? I'd like to know the status of the residents of it and what we're doing to mitigate the problem that we saw in the media relating to living conditions there.
Yeah, the municipal manager will answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
As you know, we are required to foreclose when folks owe us property taxes. We have no choice. It is the law. So we did foreclose on that particular property, and with that property came the Big Timber Hotel as well as the Showboat Club. That was closed, and that's been padlocked, so that was out of business when we acquired the two facilities. The Big Timber Motel, on the other hand, was in fact occupied. They have 24 residents that live there, and their ages range from a couple of weeks old to in the 80s. And we have families, we have individuals. When we did the inspection of the facility after receiving deed to the property, we found several things that were code violations. So since we were the owners and we also are the enforcers, we did serve a notice of violation to ourselves and posted it as the law requires. And as the law requires, we went in and started mediating those issues that were relevant to safety and that were violations of the code. The way forward was approved by the building official, and we did, just like everybody else, have to show them how we were going to make the required improvements, and they had to be acceptable to the building official. They were. As a result of that, we did reestablish all of the utilities, those that were closed for lack of payment by the owner of the facility. We also repaired one of the boilers that was out because there was no heat to the facility. And we also established and fixed the hot water heaters so that there's hot water in the facility. We are in the process right now of actually putting in a brand new second boiler because the way the system was set up, two boilers controlled the heat to the building. So one half the building was controlled by one boiler, the other half by the second boiler. The second boiler was in complete disarray, and that was one of the reasons, and it was unsafe, and that's one of the reasons that the natural gas was closed off from that building. In fact, it had been closed by Instar since last April. So within the next day or so, we should have full heat in there with this second boiler. And as I established earlier, they do have all hot water, and they do have heat to the other side. Now, that takes care of the notice of violation issues that were relevant. We also have an issue, which is more of a nuisance, and we're trying to assist the residents, and that has to do with bed bug infestation as well as rodent infestation. We're working with the residents, and we're also coming up with ways to assist them in eradicating those particular nuisances. If you have any further questions as to how we proceed from here, I'll be glad to tell you that.
Mr. Michaelis, thank you and the mayor very much for taking care of these people. It wasn't of their design. They were paying the res, I understand, and it wasn't being put towards that facility. But thank you very much. I understand you guys had the fire department go in there and get smoke detectors because they had no smoke detectors at all, from what I understand.
That is correct. When we made the inspection, the first and the obvious violation was no smoke detectors. We asked the fire department to purchase some and put them in. They did that evening. We also had one apartment that did not meet code in any way, shape, or form because there was no secondary egress in the bedroom. We moved that person to another room that did meet egress requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Michaelis, and I will ask you at the next meeting what you've done with the bed bugs, because I'm just concerned when I see photos of less than a month-old child being exposed to bed bugs. It's not a good situation, sir. Thank you for taking care of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. For the Chair's report this evening, I would like to publicly thank the Ethics Board for all of the time that they're spending on important matters for our city. Our municipal governments is dependent upon the conscientious involvement by citizens of our boards and commissions. Members of the Ethics Board and the Board of Equalization spend countless hours without pay making our government work better. In addition to all their other recent work, the Board of Ethics has issued, per their report, on the notice of potential violation in case number 2013-4. Per code, the final report is delivered to the interested parties and publicly posted with recommendations from the Ethics Board. Since filing the report, the immediate conflict has been addressed by the respondent's voluntary resignation from the LRSA Board. The Ethics Board has identified some procedural gaps that are already being addressed. Our potential remedial actions may be up to the administration to implement. So with that being said, I'm referring this report to review for our Assembly's Ethics and Election Committee, and I'm asking the Assembly's Committee to bring recommendations back to the Assembly after briefings by our municipal attorney. And that will conclude my report. I'm going to go to individual reports, beginning with you, Mr. Birch.
We did have a meeting of the AMATS member group here just last week, and had an opportunity to review our municipal plan going forward. I think it was fairly productive, and look forward to seeing how the outcome goes. We had some minor modifications to the plan. I believe that's all posted on the website as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dembowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight I'd like to recap for the body and the public that at our last meeting I disclosed my household and marital relationship with an Anchorage firefighter per our ethics code process. The Assembly ruled that I do not have a conflict on tonight's item agenda number 14C regarding general obligation bonds for the Anchorage Fire Service area. Tonight, though, Mr. Chairman, I would additionally like to disclose that item 14F, AO 2014-19, is another general obligation bond proposal for public transportation improvements, and within that there are ambulance replacements which would benefit AFD. Additionally, Mr. Chairman, I also see a potential late on the table item from the administration. It's a resolution yet to be numbered. It's appropriating an amount not to exceed $100,000 for 2013 expenditures for the fire department. I believe I have no private or financial interest in this matter, and I can act on either of these matters, actually, and I can act in the public interest I make the disclosure tonight so you and the body may rule on any potential conflicts I may have.
Amy, thank you for your disclosure again tonight. As for the other items of this nature, I recognize no conflict for you, and I would ask if the body concur. Seeing no objection or no opposition, Ms. Dembowski, you will participate this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else that you have?
No, sir.
Mr. Steele.
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Starr.
Called for a Budget and Finance Committee meeting for next week. I can't remember if it's Wednesday or Thursday, but I've notified the members of the committee, so watch for that. We'll be taking up a couple items. I believe there's also a late on the table item tonight that'll have some discussion on that next week. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Birch mentioned last week's policy committee meeting for AMATS. One thing he did not mention is this, there is a draft report out for replacement of the Muldoon interchange with the Glen Highway. And what they appear to be leaning toward as their recommended alternative is something referred to as a diverging diamond interchange. It is an unfortunate consequence of my long-term activities in the transportation sector that I actually understood what that was before they told me. But suffice it to say, it will be similar if it's implemented in that it will require an education process like roundabouts did. However, it does have the advantage of eliminating all left turns, even if you're driving on the wrong side of the road based on your intuitive thoughts. So if you haven't, I would encourage you to Google that and learn what a diverging diamond interchange is, because when it comes your way, I'm sure you'll get lots of questions. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Trombley.
Ethics and Elections Committee met last week, and we discussed 3 items. First one was the status of the April 1st election and the clerk's office preparation for that. And I'll say that they were very thorough. They're a little bit behind, but they feel as though everything will be caught up in time for the election. We just emphasized that if they need additional personnel or budget appropriations, just to come to us not at the 11th hour, but beforehand, so we can make sure that we have everything taken care of. And I do want to thank the clerk's office, Ms. Mosier, especially for all the hard work that she's done in preparation for this. We also dealt with Ms. Dembowski's ethics code change and Mr. Trainey's ethics code change. While we didn't come to any definitive resolution at that time, one of the things that we did discuss is that since it's not a pressing issue, we will be delaying that for additional work because there were some questions. So that's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Audit Committee met on January 23rd, and the purpose of this meeting was to review and endorse the Internal Auditor's 2014 audit plan. We didn't, 2 of our members weren't able to make it, but we did have a quorum, and with the quorum present, we endorsed the audit plan, and we recommend approval by this body and the mayor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Honeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will just remind our constituents as well as the body here, where the ice cleats, beware of the icy, slippery roads. So a little fracture in the right wrist should be okay in about 6 weeks. The January meeting of the Public Safety Committee, I reported last meeting, I believe, was in the second week of January, second Wednesday of January, and that was an error by me. It was the confusion and conversation commitment from the clerk's office, not their fault, mine. So going forward, of course, we are scheduled at the conference room here at the LUSAC Library on the ground floor on the 3rd Wednesdays, and so I'll make sure we get that out in plenty of time. So I reported in January it'll be on the 2nd Wednesdays, and of course that error is mine. Saying that, our next meeting is Wednesday, February the 19th, and I look forward to having some continued dialogue. I will say that, and I'll hold some comments regarding the recommendation of the body. We did notify the clerk's office in time for a notice in January's meeting, and I believe that was noticed. I'm not sure if it went to the media, but we did contact ahead of time. We gave the agenda out. But we did take up the issue that's before us tonight on the ballot proposition reference community service officers, and I'll give more comments at that closing of that.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. Ms. Johnston.
You've all received notice that we're going to be having a committee of the whole of the Enterprise Committee on Friday, February 7th, to discuss issues with the port and ML&P. And I just want to put you all on a little bit of notice. The CFO of ML&P just came up to me to say that there might be a scheduling conflict with he and the general manager on that Friday, so I'll be working that out with the chair and the clerk as far as how we can, and with ML&P to see how we address that.
Mr. Trombley?
Ms. Johnson, you don't have, so what you're saying is you don't have a specific time on Friday, or is that scheduled?
No,
I can't remember.
that's definitely scheduled. The port,
What time is that starting in?
Noon.
That's right. And we are meeting at City Hall?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Dembowski?
My question is actually for Mr. Honeman, so I'll wait till Ms. Johnston's done.
Thank you.
Are you
Would
done,
you-
Jennifer? Okay. Mr. Honeman?
Yes.
My question was for the Public Safety Committee. First, I want to say I'm sorry you broke your arm.
Thanks.
I hope you heal quickly. Secondly, though, did you receive my email requesting the Public Safety Committee look into the LifeMed issue?
I got an email recently, and I haven't read through the request on it. I got an email response from the Transportation Commissioner reference that, but I'm not sure about yours, so I apologize if I didn't read that clearly.
Well, that's okay. And just for the body's clarification, I was at the Chudiak Eagle River Chamber of Commerce meeting on Friday, and it was presented to me that LifeMed, the only bed-to-bed transporter in Anchorage, has shut their doors. And the question in the public has become, is this a byproduct of the taxi ordinance, which I'm not convinced at this point it is, but I feel this could be a significant issue, especially for ambulance transport in our town, because if the fire department has to pick up the bulk of this load, we're going to be in trouble already being short of ambulances. So I think this is an issue I would really love to see the Public Safety Committee bring up, and you might want to bring transportation to the table when you do that.
I will, and if I can respond, Mr. Chairman, briefly, my understanding is that the ambulance, or what looks like an ambulance service, LifeMed performs for patients that are bed-bound, has not stopped. It's the van service for those that are less than. However, ironically, I saw, just today as I was going into Providence, I saw a van transporting someone, and I saw one of the ambulances that used to be TransCare also transporting someone.
Yeah, and just Mr. Honeman, just to follow up, I know the transportation inspector has been working with Bach Limousine and TransCare and trying to mitigate this, but like I said, this has been probably the most popular topic I've gotten 24 hours, the number of phone calls since I've been on the body, so I know people in the healthcare industry are incredibly worried, so I would proactively like you guys to look at it if you would.
Will do.
Thank you.
Mr. Vakelis, you were in the queue. Did you change your mind?
I changed my mind only because Mr. Honeman did state it correctly that it's not the ambulance service, it's the wheelchair and other service that they provide.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Trainee.
Mr. Chairman, how are you doing?
I am doing well, sir. How are you this evening?
Fine. How's your back?
It's hurting.
Thought so. Only thing we did, we had the Rules Committee met this week, and what we dealt with was the issue of the Citizens Task Force. We're still working on the recommendations. We're not ready to bring it forward yet, so probably by the next meeting we're ready to go. There's just a few issues we need to clean up with it.
Okay.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can follow up on that comment as a member of the Rules Committee. The ordinance is on the agenda for tonight for public hearing, and I would like to let folks know that I'm going to ask that we continue the public hearing to the meeting of January 28th because we have a new draft, and we're going to have another Rules Committee with the Citizens Task Force to review the draft so that we can get it right before it's out here on the floor for public hearing. So I just wanted to mention that, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Did you mean February 11th meeting?
February 11th.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes. And Mr. Trainee, for those that are here, I want to be clear, you intend to continue the Community Council ordinance as well?
Yes, I had numerous calls from people, actually in Eagle River, Chudiak, concerned about how late we were getting out of here and trying to drive home because they're convinced that we're going to have a deep freeze shortly. This weather can't continue forever.
Well, the one we need to give a heads up is Mr. Honeman.
You what, sir?
The one we need to give a heads up is Mr.
I'm
Honeman. He
told
has
he
a
got
problem with
injured
ice.
in a fight at UAA. I don't know what he was up to.
Okay.
I have ice grippers. Thank you.
Thank you. That completes our committee reports. We have an addendum to the agenda tonight as well as a 3 laid on the table. So I would like to have a motion to incorporate.
So moved.
Any objection? Seeing, hearing none, I will read the addendum to the agenda into the minutes. We have 9A1, AR 26, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly and Mayor Dan Sullivan honoring Rasmussen Foundation, recipient of the 2014 Shining Lights Award. We have 9B5, AR 27, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly supporting Governor Parnell's proposal for a $3 billion appropriation from the Constitutional Budget Reserve Fund with designated use in the state retirement systems and requesting strong support by the 28th Alaska Legislature. 9B6, AR 28, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage reappropriating a contribution of $20,845 from the 2013 operating budget area-wide General Fund 101 to the Miscellaneous Grants Funds 261, all within the Community Development Department for the ongoing historic preservation community efforts. And that's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum AM 74. B7, AR 29, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage reappropriating unused, unobligated grant contributions from the state direct/federal pass-through grant funds 231 back to the originating operating funds fund balance. And that is accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 75. We have 9D16, AM 69, 2014 grant to the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation to operate and administer AEDC programs in the amount of $262,000. D17, AM 70, 2014 grant to Campfire USA Alaska Council for the purpose of operation and administration of the Campfire Alaska program in the amount of $125,000. D18, AM 71, 2014 grant to Greater Anchorage, Inc. for the purpose of operational fees for the Fur Rendezvous Festival in the amount of $60,000. D19, AM 72, a sole source contract award to PrintWorks for printing 2014 election ballots for the Municipality of Anchorage Municipal Clerk's Office, $53,993.20. D20, AM 73, Internal Audit Department 2014 Audit Plan. 9E4, AIM 19, November 2013 expenditure reports. E5, AIM 20, fourth quarter 2013 performance measurement report. And we have item 12, appearance request, Paul Michelson Jr. regarding snow removal and placement in municipal right-of-way. And inlaid on the table items, we have 9B8, AR number 31, a resolution of the Anchorage Assembly modifying and approving the regulations of policy AG 38. We have laid on the table 9F4, an AO, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code Section 28.20.010 to change the date for the regular municipal election from the first Tuesday in April to the Tuesday after the first Monday in November, with the effective date to be 2017. And we have a laid on the table F9F5, an AAR, a resolution appropriating amount not to exceed $100,000 for area-wide service area Fund 101, fund balance to be area-wide service area Fund 101, and an amount not to exceed $1,700,000 of Anchorage Fire Service Area Fund 131, fund balance to the Anchorage Fire Service Area Fund 131, all within the Anchorage Municipal Fire Department 2013 operating budget commensurate with 2013 expenditures. And we have an item 14E2 laid on the table, AM 36, an ordinance providing for the submission to the qualified voters of the municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, the question of the insurance of not to exceed $5,550,000 of general obligation bonds to the municipality of Anchorage to pay costs of area-wide facilities capital improvement projects to include public facilities, security upgrades, Chester Creek Sports Complex parking lot expansion, and Mulcahy Stadium relocation, City Hall safety improvements, Lusac Library renovation, improvements to the Anchorage Golf Course, and related capital improvements, and the question of an increase in the municipal tax cap limitation to pay associated operations and maintenance costs at the election to be held in the municipality of Anchorage on April 1st, 2014. That completes our laid on the table and reading of the addendum. I would ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Okay. Mr. Flynn, I have you in the queue.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that last laid on table item was 14 Delta or 14 Echo 2?
That was 14 Echo.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. Any items to be pulled this evening? Mr. Birch?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to pull item 9F4. That would be the ordinance establishing a election date change for the purposes of establishing a public hearing.
F4?
Yes, 9F4, and I'd like to set the public hearing date for that as February 25th.
Second.
We need, pardon? Yeah, we need to do that later when I get back to you, Mr. Birch, set the date.
Okay.
Ms. Dembowski?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull 9 Delta 14.
Mr. Steele?
No items.
Mr. Starr?
Nine F5 for the same, to set a public hearing date. Can you also come back to me as well?
Yes,
Because
sir.
I've got a question on just the recently submitted.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn?
Nothing, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Trombley?
No items.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to pull 9 Apple 1. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Honeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to pull 9D Delta 13 on the regular agenda. And just to clarify from, and I know you read it, 9F5, which, is that the...
That's the money for the fire department, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Johnston?
No items, thank you.
Mr. Trainee?
Nothing, sir.
Okay. I show that we have pulled A1, D, 13 and 14, F, 4 and 5. Did I miss any items?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
yeah, the administration would like to pull 9B8.
9B8.
Bravo.
I've got it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other items? Okay, I would ask for you to vote on the consent agenda lest the items that have been pulled for further action. Okay. That carries unanimously. We now have before us item 9A, AR number 26.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any objection? Seeing, hearing none, Ms. Gray Jackson.
I'm going to read this. We're on 9A1, correct?
Correct.
Yes, I'm going to read it, and I think Mr. Flynn is going to present it.
Do we have anybody here from the Rasmussen
Miss-
Foundation tonight? Or from the Temple Beth Shalom tonight?
We do not, but please read it into the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly and Mayor Dan Sullivan honoring Rasmussen Foundation, recipient of the 2014 Shining Lights Award. Whereas Congregation Beth Shalom annually selects one individual or entity to be honored with the Congregation Shining Lights Award for exemplifying the Jewish value of the Tikkun Olam, repairing the world through dedication to community service and demonstration of the highest level of character, integrity, and ethics. Whereas the Rasmussen family immigrated from Sweden to Alaska in 1901, tirelessly promoted the growth of the territory and the development of its rich natural resources, resuscitated and eventually assumed leadership of National Bank of Alaska, growing it into a successful private business. Whereas Rasmussen Foundation was formed in 1955 by Jenny Olson Rasmussen in honor of her late husband, E.A. Rasmussen. Whereas during its 59-year existence, Rasmussen Foundation has awarded over $230 million in grants to nonprofit organizations in Anchorage and across the state of Alaska. Whereas Rasmussen Foundation's mission is to promote a better life for Alaskans. Whereas the Rasmussen Foundation has initiated grant programs for the benefit of individual and community philanthropy, libraries and museums, arts and culture, health and human services, overall wellness, and community development. Whereas Elmer Rasmussen left his personal fortune of more than $400 million to charity, much of it to the Family Foundation, when he passed away in 2000. And today, Elmer's 3 children, Edward, Lily, and Judy, daughter-in-law Catherine, and grandchildren Adam Gibbons and Natasha von Emhoff, serve on the Foundation's 11-member board of directors and carry on his legacy. Whereas Ed and Kathy Rasmussen, along with board members, Foundation CEO President Diane Kaplan, and Foundation staff actively volunteer on many boards in Anchorage, throughout Alaska, and nationally. And whereas in recognition of the service to all in our state and its tremendous commitment to the public good, Rasmussen Foundation has been selected to be the 2014 recipient of the Shining Lights Award, which will be presented on Thursday, April 24th, 2014, at a banquet at the Dena'ina Civic and Convention Center in Anchorage. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Anchorage Assembly recognizes this service to the people of Anchorage and communities throughout Alaska and congratulates Rasmussen Foundation 2014 Shining Lights Award recipient, passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 20th day of January 2014.
We now have before us item 9B8, AR number 31, a resolution of the Anchorage Assembly modifying and approving of the regulations and policy AG 38. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you. With the body's indulgence, if we could postpone action on this item till the next meeting. We just have seen it. It's a change in building policy that's fairly significant. We'd just like to have the opportunity to review it since we just saw it for the first time. So it's so move.
Well,
It's a motion to postpone to the next meeting.
Well, Mr. Mayor, as you're well aware, since you were on the body for 9 years, you understand that it requires Assembly approval of regulations. The policy was written and put into place without ever allowing the Assembly to review it for approval of those regulations. And since it's within the city or within the Assembly's ability to approve and modify regulations, there's really no need to postpone.
Mr. Starr?
well, I guess along the same lines as Mr. Trombley, through the chair, when the building department adopts a new policy such as AG 38, is it not normal to run that through, especially legislative? How have you guys been handling these in the past?
Mr. Weaver, probably best to address that answer.
Mr. Trombley?
Well, actually in the queue for discussion. Mr. Weaver, specific, a statement that says, your new policy or your new Mr. Trombley's referring to as legislation, talks about a statement that an independent reviewing professional accept responsibility for the plan review and acknowledgement, therefore, is wording inside your policy, and it looks like law, quite frankly. It looks like a legislative statement. So with the authority that we do that legislative, have we crossed over here?
Well, I think it's a combination of policies. I think it's a combination of ordinance. The ordinance was put into place. We tried to effectuate it with policy. We sent out the notice to the home builders, a 30-day notice of how to effectuate the policy. There were issues with that from the home builders. I can tell you that, just as a general observation on the ordinances, since the ordinance went into place, about 60 permits have been processed under this procedure with exempt review.
What ordinance? Did you say the word?
For exempt single-family duplex structures.
Sure.
We've tried to the best of our ability in accordance with the ordinance to implement it, and we've done that with policies. What's laid on the table this evening, substantially gets into the procedures, the administrative procedures that we use in the department to effectuate the ordinance, and I have serious problems with this resolution.
Can you suspend AG 38 until we deal with it?
We could certainly do that.
I mean, it'd be a recommendation that I would have that. I'm not going to order you to. That's not my job, of course, but I guess it makes sense if we want to postpone it for discussion.
Basically what the resolution with this and working with the home builders on our monthly meeting was to try to the best of both of our abilities to implement it in accordance with the law. There's disagreement with respect to the nuances that are in the law, and this resolution addresses some of those, but not in the public interest.
Understand. I'll defer to Mr. Trombley. Thank you.
Well, one of the concerns I had, Mr. Weaver, is that in your policy, at one point, in the AG 38, and I removed that language, is that you said that if there's disputes in the field, it would then follow a process, at which point it would go back to the building official and allow them to do plan review. When we write an ordinance that says it shall not be the responsibility of any municipal agency to do plan review, you've essentially written a policy that supersedes the ordinance.
Basically.
And so that's not policy.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Trombley, the building official is the ultimate authority with the building code. When there are disputes in the field, the building official will arbitrate those issues, regardless.
Where is that written in code?
It's in the code that
Are you talking about alternate means and methods?
No, the establishment of the building official's responsibilities.
Well, we're going to absolutely disagree on that.
I'd recommend a work session on any further changes.
I disagree with the work session.
Mr. Wheeler?
Through the chair, if the body is willing to review this so we can get a sense of what the differences are between what the department is proposing and what Mr. Trombley is proposing, that would be helpful. We can address these issues, the pros and cons on either side, for your consideration. And as Mr. Weaver indicated, suspending the policy until that time would be appropriate. As I've said before, there are some policies that affect internal operations. Some policies help inform the code. In the third category are policies that rise to the level of being regulations that require your approval. Without being able to analyze these proposed changes, I can't tell you whether all of these changes fall into either of those categories. I certainly think the policy as a whole would benefit from a review so we can advise as to what needs to be approved formally by the Assembly and where you can weigh in if you think it's your prerogative to do so.
Mr. Trainee.
And the mayor asked to have a 2-week delay on this. Mr. Weaver said he can postpone implementation of this policy for those 2 weeks. I think we need to give the mayor that time. And with Mr. Weaver's understanding, they won't be putting this into effect. We need to move on, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Starr?
I appreciate that guidance, Mr. Trainee, but my purpose in sort of looking at it from all perspectives is what Mr. Wheeler just said, is that this isn't generated by us. This is generated by an internal department, and it has some pretty strong language in it. So what reach now does the executive branch have in lawmaking? And so I'm okay with that if the reference is that, but the legal review is probably what we ought to institute now for policy-wide statements across the board, if that's what's going to happen. So as we push just this topic down the road, I'd be happy to talk about it more in a global scope of other policies that are coming out of departments that perhaps drift into legislative actions.
Mr. Starr, I agree with you. I think 2 weeks gives us the time to get legal counsel
I
together
don't know.
with us.
And it is partly legal. Mr. Wheeler, particular through the chair, on page 1, line 34, I'll move you quickly then to line 36. The premise of the policy is that anybody that does the independent plan review is going to have to make this statement and sort of waive rights. It also binds them with the requirement, it appears, to defend the municipality. Is that a good policy to put down if it's not called a policy? Why and how could you bind a private entity from the requirement to defend their work product? And so in the scope of that, I don't want to debate you on the topic, but this is the kind of stuff that needs to be looked at. If you're requiring somebody there, they're going to balk at it at the counter, an independent reviewer. So in that, the 2 weeks, I agree, but it's stuff like that that I think, we might want to come back through and make sure we're treating the users correctly.
Through the chair, Mr. Starr, I believe the indemnity provision is actually part of the code. That was one of the trade-offs. If there was not going to be municipal review, then the municipality did not want to be in a position of having to be defending itself if there were problems in the structure. So one of the trade-offs, I think it's a code.
It may be.
This just tries to implement that by coming up with how do we get that into a form that the review.
I understand what it's intended to do. My challenge is how far does it reach? Thank you.
Ms. Dombowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing that I've always been very leery about is when we have complicated issues like planning and building, I want to make sure I understand what I'm voting on before I vote on it personally. But with that said, I disagree with Mr. Weaver to some regard when he said ultimately the building inspector has the ultimate authority. We write the code, so I disagree with him on that one. But my commitment to, Mr. Mayor, I can go with you on postponing it 2 weeks, but I would like a commitment from you that, I don't know if we do executive orders municipality-wide, but would you make sure by 5 o'clock tomorrow this policy is suspended, AG 38? Okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. In light of that, I would support a 2-week delay just so I have time to wrap my mind around what's being debated here.
No one else in the queue, please vote on the motion to postpone till 2 weeks. Motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 9D13. It is AM 57, and it is operations of the Northeast Community Center and Mountain View Recreation Center.
Move to approve. And my question, and I apologize I didn't get it to you earlier. Chair, through the Parks and Recs, I'm not sure if there he is. It's not listed on the AR here what the previous amounts were under the contracts. I'm just wondering, as you know, in years past we've had to revisit the operating funds and perhaps using grants to make up some gaps and such. Just trying to figure out, Mr. Rod, if possible, through the administration, if this funding is similar to last year, more than last year, on par with what we've been through the contracts. Is this the target? I'm just trying to figure that out, and I apologize for not having a question earlier.
Through the chair, Mr. Honeman, previous amounts were for the Mountain View Boys and Girls Club, $350,000, Northeast Community Center, $181,350. Both of these increases reflect actions by the Assembly during the budget revisions.
And so this is going to meet the operating costs that we believe to not have, I guess, diminishment of services and
no diminished services. These are incorporated into their annual budgets.
Thank you.
Mr. Flynn.
Just to remind the body, Mr. Chairman, you're done, Mr. Rock. This was one of the budget amendments we approved in November. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. No one else in the queue, please vote. Motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 9D14, AM number 58, MD Multiple Service Vehicle, Sidewalk Tractor.
Move to approve.
Ms. Dembowski?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for indulging me on this one. We don't get the opportunity very often to give an attaboy, but I would like to give some positive remarks to the administration. Ron specifically, Mr. Mayor, I've had the opportunity to tour the small and heavy maintenance fleet shops. And during that process, one of the things that I found was fascinating, the department, through the administration, they have been engaging manufacturers and utilizing experimental equipment that's being developed, so big tractors, snow blowers, and they work with these manufacturers trying out this equipment in our environment, and then we're able to get them at a significantly lower cost than if we were to buy the market product. And I think this is a great example of where you see ingenuity and creativity in administrations. And in this one instance, we see where they have saved us $72,000, one vehicle. So, Mr. Mayor, I think you and the staff both should be commended for this type of saving. This is the out-of-the-box creative thinking that I think should be highlighted. And I just wanted to put that on the record, and I wanted people to be aware that we do have creativity in government accounting. So, in a good way,
Thank you, Ms. Dembowski.
Thank you. No one else in the queue, please vote. Motion carries unanimously. We have now before us item 9F4. It is AO, and it is an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending the Anchorage Municipal Code, Section 28.20.010, to change the date for the regular municipal election from the first Tuesday in April to the Tuesday after the first Monday in November, with the effective year to be 2017.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that we establish the public hearing date as February 25th.
February 25th. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't agree with that date, and I would move that we schedule the public hearing for April 22nd. If you'd like for me to explain my reason, I'd be happy to do so.
Second.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that our community has been confused enough, and enough is enough. You know, our community right now, they don't know or wondering if the election is April 1st, and I think that having this on the floor, actually it shouldn't even be introduced, but I don't have any control over that. But just having this out there right now and a public hearing is going to confuse our citizens and our community even more. And that's not the purpose in good government, Mr. Chairman. And I think that it is in our best interest, if this is going to be introduced, that we wait until after the April 1st election to have a public hearing on this, so in order not to confuse our citizens any more than they already are. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm going to have you vote on Ms. Gray Jackson's amendment to have it for April 22nd.
Mr. Chairman, I thought I made a motion to establish the date as the 25th. Does that take precedence?
We had a motion following that with a second for the...
Did we have a vote on my motion?
Comes after this vote.
Yes. We have to vote this one and come back to yours, Mr. Birch.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I was in the queue. Can I make one quick comment?
Yes.
Personally, I think the voters of our community are astute enough to recognize when we say there's going to be an election April 1st, there's going to be an election April 1st. So I'm not swayed by the voter confusion argument. So I would just ask that the body vote down Ms. Gray Jackson's proposal. But additionally, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Okay. What I'm going to ask on this is a item for introduction. I'm not going to have debate, but I have Mr. Wheeler in the queue, so I do feel it's appropriate for you to make a comment, and then Mr. Wheeler, we're going to vote.
Through the chair, thank you. Assembly members, this gets into that area that we've discussed a couple of times recently, but not very much in the last 30 years, and that is the notion of the Charter Commission's desire to make sure that the majority could not silence the minority. And one of the ways they addressed that issue was by putting into the charter that once 3 members sponsor an ordinance, it gets a public hearing. And I'm concerned that having the majority try to control when the public hearing happens may offend that charter provision that protects the minority and allows the minority to get a public hearing on their ordinance. So if the minority, the 3 sponsors, want their ordinance heard at a date that complies with code, then I'm concerned that the majority cannot move that date absent agreement from the 3 sponsors.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, on that point.
Yes, Mr. Flynn.
Given that the administration holds the view they can veto the setting of an election date, that is an inconsistent view in my mind.
We didn't vote on Mrs. Jackson's. No, I'm done debating. We're going to vote. We're voting on Mrs. Evelyn Gray Jackson's motion. Motion fails 6-5. We're back to the date that Mr. Birch proposed. Please vote. Oh, yes. Okay. We just, okay. We will. We'll reflect that. We just accept. We've got it, but we can't get it up. So we accept the date of February. What was the number?
No. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Do you have that date?
I do not have
It's the second meeting in February.
February 25th.
February 25th. That was the date that you gave. We now have before us item 9F5, and that is an AR, a resolution appropriating an amount not to exceed.
Actually, Mr. Chairman,
yes,
we were required to have a public hearing on this item due to the amount, so I move to introduce and schedule a public hearing on the 11th.
Second.
Third.
Okay.
And hopefully there's no controversy. The idea is also a committee meeting next week to discuss this.
Okay. That, Mr. Trainee?
Budget. I want to know exactly how much money they have, how much money's been spent on overtime, because I'm hearing rumors that they're on the negative side. I want to see where this is going.
Well, clearly they overspent their budget, Mr. Trainee. That's
I don't
what this
want to
item
know how
does.
deep it is.
I'll do my best to get that information. So through the chairman, Ms. Mahoney, can you support us at that work session committee? You're there, obviously. And then also Mr. Vikalis, I guess. Could we have the fire chief there? I think it'd be helpful. So we'll plan a couple hours for that. And Mr. Trainee, I'll put that out. I'll ask for a full overtime accounting by PCN number. And
Thank you, Mr.
we'll pull
Starr.
some of the other data in that you've asked for.
When are you going to have that meeting, sir?
I believe it's next Wednesday, the 5th.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That completes our consent agenda. What I would ask is, do we have anyone that was appointed to a board or a commission tonight? And if so, please come up and introduce yourself so we can appreciate the service that you're willing to give.
I'm a little dizzy sitting there. Hello, my name is Lynn Penny, and I'm honored to be before you today. Thank you, Chairman Hall and members of the Assembly, Mayor Sullivan. My thanks to the ADA Advisory Commission for unanimously putting my name forward to the mayor, and my thanks to the mayor for his appointment. With my passion for the public process, advocacy for those with disabilities, and my commitment to public service, I shall serve with diligence. Thank you for this honor and opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Pardon? Were you appointed to a board or commission?
No, I was invited to come here to talk.
No, not at this point. Okay, we are going to take our. Pardon? Yes, please, come on up. Board or Commission?
Evening, everyone. My name is Angeline Waske, and I was appointed to the Chugiak Eagle River Advisory Board. It's my privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Flynn.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to change the order of day and waive the rules in order to take up public appearance requests at this time.
Second.
Mr. Flynn, I appreciate that. Anybody opposed to that? We have Larry. No displays. No, sir. No displays.
Apologize. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for the invite to come here. And I apologize if I'm too blunt, but since I only have 3 minutes, I'm going to get to the point. For every pack, there is a wolf. For every wolf, there is a pack. For every pack, there is a wolf. I am Larry Charles Lang Jr. I'm a 100% disabled veteran from injuries sustained while in the Army in 2008. I feel the city of Anchorage, the property managers, the landlords, and the restaurants in Anchorage are discriminating against us, the handicapped and disabled. The handicapped and disabled people of Anchorage have no access for the use of their wheelchairs, which include ramps and elevators. The handicapped and disabled people of Anchorage do not have enough handicapped parking to access apartment buildings. The handicapped and disabled people of Anchorage do not have the proper accommodations to use canes and other necessities that are helpful and are used at apartment complexes and restaurants to help with people's disabilities due to the issue of no ramps or elevators. In the apartment complexes or restaurants, there are only stairs to accommodate the more fortunate who are not physically challenged and not enough handicapped parking for those who are physically challenged. It's as if I am being told, you are white, so you can't live here, nor have access to the building we own, and we do not rent or serve food to the people like you, due to who you are. What is the Anchorage Assembly going to do about this particular issue of discrimination against the handicapped and disabled people in regards to parking and their access to apartment buildings and restaurants in Anchorage, Alaska? There's absolutely no handicapped parking or a way for disabled people to access any apartments and restaurants in the city of Anchorage. For example, no wheelchair ramps or elevators. An excellent example will be Wiley Brooks, Parkview Apartments on 625 West 9th Avenue. I was evicted when I asked for a handicapped parking spot. I have a perfect record of on-time rent and have never been in trouble at the apartment complex. There are no reasons or answers for the eviction from Laura Cantrell, who is the property manager, except for my 1-year lease that had expired and then my 1-year lease that went month to month. An eviction letter is right there. I asked Laura Cantrell about the parking situation, and her answer was, where can you park at? There are not enough parking spaces. Where would I give you a handicapped parking space? I lived at Parkview Apartments for the past 2.5 years and parked behind the building until All About You Women's Salon raised the price and the parking rate was not affordable. When I started to look for apartments in Anchorage recently, I looked and realized that the city of Anchorage had forgotten about the disabled and handicapped individuals who live in Anchorage. Instead, Mayor Dan Sullivan and Anchorage Assembly are discussing a tennis court that might end up being built and other issues that do not pertain or accommodate to the handicapped and disabled people in Anchorage. I challenge the City of Anchorage, Mayor Dan Sullivan, and Anchorage Assembly members to fix this particular issue of discrimination against the handicapped and disabled. If you, the Anchorage Assembly, Mayor Dan Sullivan, or the Disability Law Center of Alaska cannot give me a practical answer for who I need to talk to or where I need to go, I will climb the chain of command and may end up in Washington, D.C. or the Supreme Court for an answer. I will represent the handicapped and disabled people in Anchorage, Alaska. I want no excuses because I'm a registered voter of Alaska and I only have 3 minutes to speak, and you, the Assembly, and the Mayor have months to promote yourselves. There will be no room for excuses or finger pointing. I promise you, I will take one or all of your seats here in Anchorage Assembly and even the Mayor's seat, and I will make this change happen. So there will be more accessibility and accommodations in and around apartment buildings and restaurants in Anchorage for disabled and handicapped.
Sir,
Team, one fight.
I'm going to need you to summarize. Your time is up. The beeper didn't go off, but we're at 4 minutes.
Okay. I'll never accept defeat. I'll never quit. I'll never leave a fallen comrade. My name is Larry Charles England Jr. We are being discriminated against. If you haven't figured out who we are by this time, get out of your seat and go home. Get it done and fix it now. I vow I'll be here every meeting and speak until the issue of discrimination against the handicapped and disabled individuals is resolved. I have to work. I will still make my point. There should never be any excuses why I won't have another invitation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Which you are elected to
Sir?
drive on. Questions or comments from Anchorage Assembly or individuals who stand?
I have some questions for you. Mr. Honeman.
Sorry, right here. And first of all, thank you for your service to the country. Secondly, there was a lady that was just ahead of you that was introducing herself. I'd say two prior, Ms. Lynn Kinney, and she recently appointed to the Americans with Disabilities Act Advisory Committee and a commission, and I'd urge you to contact that commission to see if they could perhaps review some things. Also, Anchorage Equal Rights Commission, if you were evicted from an apartment or you believe you were, I'm not sure if you've contacted them.
Mr. Holman, I did so.
Okay. So I would recommend you continue to follow their suggestions or advice, and it sounds like you already know about the Disability Law Center as well. The
Yes,
Disability
I have,
Law.
sir.
And have you talked to anybody from the Veterans Administration or anyone that could
Yes, I
perhaps
have, sir.
work into it?
Okay.
So,
Ms. Gray Jackson.
In touch with me, please.
Okay. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank you for coming out and expressing your concerns because it is a really big concern in this community. And Mr. Train and I have a constituent who is constantly talking about the issue and trying to do things to make the situation better. We even had a work session on the issue, I don't know, I think maybe a year and a half ago, and things still aren't better. Costco's made some real nice improvements because of this one constituent. But let me just say this, okay? I'm going to talk with our ombudsman and Mr. Trainey, my colleague, for the representative Midtown, and figure out a way to deal with the situation. Because number one, it's federal requirements, and there is a lot missing. And I just wanted to say that, and thank you very much again for coming
Hey, Ms.
out.
Gray
Thank you,
Jackson.
Mr. Chairman.
I just heard about a bunch of money getting thrown around, $3 billion from the state, and all this stuff, all this money going everywhere. Where is it for handicapped and disabled people who need parking? Where is it? Nowhere. People want us to walk 3 blocks to get to an apartment building. You forgot about us, every one of you. Every single one of you forgot about us. All right? Pick it up. Let's do something about this, because I will take all your seats.
Thank
I
you.
promise.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting
Yes.
me speak, sir.
Mr. Mickelson.
Is that it?
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Drive on, Edwards. Don't quit.
Mr. Chairman, fellow Assembly members, appreciate the time to speak for you. As much as I'm before you, I'm not seasoned enough to speak here, but I'll try my best. I have with me Len, as my next-door neighbor. I have an issue involving snow removal in the cul-de-sacs in the streets of Anchorage. We live on a private cul-de-sac that is surrounded by 4 residents. I have photos and a survey map I'd like to bring up to the DS, if I may, so you could...
Yes, give them to the clerk, please.
Sorry?
Give them to the clerk. Thank you.
And for the record, I should have said my name is Paul Michelson. Last name is spelled M-I-C-H-E-L-S-O-H-N. So we have this subdivision in which I have been voluntarily removing snow from 4 of the neighbors in the cul-de-sac. The manner in which the cul-de-sac was developed back in 1981, I believe, 77, it was developed with pie-shaped lots, leaving no room for the disbursement of on-site snow without affecting the neighbors to either side. Mr. Len here, and I keep forgetting his last name, pronouncing it, Kirkendall, he's over 90 years old. He's a World War II veteran. I don't want to see him out there shoveling snow by himself. The neighbor to his left is a 73-year-old woman and lives by herself. I don't want to see her shoveling her snow. So I have volunteered, and the neighbor to my other left, which would be to the north, is a handicapped gentleman with, I shouldn't say handicapped, disabled gentleman with cancer. So I have volunteered to shovel all 4 driveways at my own cost, at my own expense. What I do is I plow the snow and I place it into the middle of the cul-de-sac, which already has snow previously placed there from the municipality streets and maintenance. I add maybe approximately a dump truck to a dump truck and a half full of snow per year. Last year, it was mentioned, I talked to the foreman of the road maintenance, and I said, if my snow is bothering you, we as a neighborhood, we as the 4 residents will gladly pay a fee, and we'll give you $400, $600 for the removal of the extra snow that we're adding to the pile. He had no problem with it. We keep it in a nice, neat pile. What I actually do also, I go above and beyond. I clean the entire surface of the cul-de-sac so that gentlemen like Lynn can get out, and the woman I was explaining previously. The last snowfall, which was an average, I'm out of time already.
I've got some questions for you, Mr. Michelson. Mr. Honeman.
Mr. Michelson, first of all, thanks for doing that as a neighbor, but can you finish that? Just tell me where you're getting to as far as, was there been a concern lately?
With the last snowfall, which was a total accumulation of, at my house, was approximately 7 to 8 inches, the snow removal maintenance people did not show up for a period of over 5 days. I could not see leaving the snow in the street for a period of 5 days because there was 5 vehicles stuck in the road. So I took my personal plow truck and actually went down the entire distance of Balchin Drive to Wisconsin so that those 5 people could actually get out to Wisconsin.
Was anybody ever telling you, or has anybody from the city told you not to do it?
I was approached Sunday before last, on a Sunday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon by Frank Kelly, a zoning officer for the municipality of Anchorage, and told me if I did not cease to place the snow in the street that I would be assessed with an approximately $300 fine. And after that, it would be incrementally more money until it turned into a civil case with the city. And I don't want to enter into a civil case with the city. I am doing no harm to the street. I am very protective of it. I've been in this town 40 years. I've been a resident of Anchorage for 40 years. I'm in the construction business. I know how to operate equipment. I know what to look for in the street. The only thing in the street is one manhole. You can see it in the one picture. It's a little dark spot in the middle of the cul-de-sac, and it's the only thing of any relevance to the neighborhood at all.
Well, I'm not sure what we can do about it from the assembly level. If it takes action from us, we'll do it, but certainly would love to talk with someone from street maintenance.
If that's a form of a question, Mr. Honeman, through the chair, there's a lot you could do about it. You can basically instruct. There's hundreds of people that do it in town. In fact, I believe there's a city, I forget what it's called, the inner city ordinance, where the businesses of the city of Anchorage actually are instructed to place their snow in the street, as long as they do it prior to the removal of the snow by the municipality. If they do it after the trucks have already been gone by, then they're assessed with a fine. But prior to that, they're actually instructed to place their snow in the street.
Thank you.
Mr. Steele.
Yes, Mr. Michelson. Thank you for coming today. And I went out and took a look at the cul-de-sac and what you had done there. And I want to say you did a nice job. It was not an obstruction. It was piled higher, probably higher than if it was just the municipal snow. So I think you did a good job for your neighbors. The issue, of course, is the law and what the requirements are. And I will take it upon myself to chat with the administration and see what can happen. But if we give you leave to do it, then there's a lot of other people in town that would like leave to do it. We can't fault the enforcement officer because he's responding to a complaint. So there's somebody in the neighborhood that doesn't particularly like you doing it, but I'm sure your neighbors do. And like I said, you did a good job. One recommendation I heard from someone when I mentioned it was that maybe along the driveways there is a place to put a little of that snow. But I will chat with the city and see what we can do on it. But I suspect we've got the regulations for a reason, and other people would not do as good a job and may either destroy some of the infrastructure, or the manholes and that type of thing, or obstruct traffic. And again, I want to make sure that that everybody realizes that you did a great job out there, and it looked better than the road around it, and it was not an obstruction. So I will chat with them, but I'm not sure that there's much I can do with regards to the ordinance. And
Mr. Chair, may I respond to that? Mr. Steele, through the chair, I probably do a better job than the municipal street maintenance does. Irregardless, the complaint was logged by a municipal grader operator. It was not logged by a member of the community. Evidently, a municipal grader operator didn't either like the job I was doing. The reason the snow was stacked higher than normal and better than normal is I took it upon myself. I borrowed a loader. I actually stacked the snow because the city leaves the snow in a way that it is unmanageable and it starts to encroach into the properties. Your other statement on there is property and there is easement, the way in 1977 the municipality of Anchorage approved the subdivision as platted. They approved the subdivision as platted with pie-shaped lots. When you draw the lot lines down and you blow the snow or shovel the snow, if I shovel my snow to the east, I'm going to throw it on Len's neighbor on property. If I throw it to the north, I'm going to throw it on the other property, vice versa. I was told by the zoning inspector that, well, if you don't have any place in the front of your yard to place your snow, you can haul it around the back of your yard, which is just not even discussable. You have 1,332 cul-de-sacs in Anchorage, I believe. It's the obligation of the city maintenance to remove the snow once to twice a year. You have a budget, I think, of approximately a spending allowance of about $500,000. I've offered to pay for the snow, my snow, if you want to call it my snow, to pay an extra fee to haul off my snow. I am not harming anybody. I am not making any inconvenience to anybody, and all I am doing is enhancing the area in which we live. A gentleman like this, 90-plus years old, if he falls in the snow, can't get out of his car, he has to visit his wife every day in the hospital for the last 11 years. He goes to visit her. If he doesn't have the ability to get there, I just feel obligated to help him out and do that. I am not impeding on anybody in the neighborhood.
Okay.
So if you approve the subdivision in 1977, the city of Anchorage should have taken into account that there was going to be a situation with snow removal, and they didn't. They approved the plat as drawn on the pictures I showed you.
Ms. Dembowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Michelson, I just want to say thank you for doing what neighbors should do for each other. You know, what you're doing really is a good deed, and it seems in this situation, government's getting in the way of common sense, and I understand regulations, as Mr. Steele says, you know, you don't want 500 people going and doing a subpar job when they're moving snow, but you have presented a solution. If the snow gets high, you can haul it away, you're even willing to pay for it. So I would suspect the mayor would probably be able to help mitigate this solution. Mr. Mayor, would you say there's some common sense solution we could come to in this avenue?
Well, we're certainly going to take it under advisement, but as Mr. Steele pointed out, you know, it may take you, the Assembly, changing the law, because if you make an exception in one cul-de-sac, there's 1,800 cul-de-sacs in town, and, you know, there's
And I have every bit of confidence between you and I and the rest of the body. We could probably come up with something where if there is some sort of fee he's going to have to end up paying because of a situation. But I'd make this commitment that we should probably vet this, and I'd be happy to help you. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Honeman?
I would encourage the same thing, and I know Mr. Thompson, Mr. Frost are here. I'd encourage them to, especially after hearing the comment wasn't made by a complaint of the neighbor, more from a municipal employee, or at least that it appears to. I'm not sure if that's debatable or not, but bottom line is, we'd be looking forward to hearing more from you, Mr. Thompson, from the administration, about some resolution.
Okay.
I'm on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michelson.
Mr. Chair and the rest of the Assembly members, I know I didn't figure I was going to get any resolution tonight on the situation, but what does one do when it snows on February 2nd? Do I proceed at risk, or do I continue as status quo, or do I what?
I would, if you're going to do it, I'd proceed with caution.
Well, I start at 5 o'clock in the morning, so the only thing I'd like back is just the one photograph, the aerial photograph.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you, members of the Assembly. Appreciate it.
You bet. We are going to take our dinner break, and we'll be back. Meeting back to order. We have before us item 11A, AO number 112, an ordinance to the Anchorage Assembly suspending AO 2013-37 as amended, pending the outcome of a referendum to be held no later than the regular election on April of 2015. This is before us for action.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move the S1 version.
Ms. Dembowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of amendments I'd like to propose to this ordinance. First amendment, I would like to delete lines 21 through 23 that refer to the outcome of the court's decision. If I can get a second. I think I just explained it. It's pretty self-explanatory. The language is no longer pertinent, and after consultation with Mr. Wheeler, he suggested that I just delete those lines.
Okay, we have an amendment before us and a second. Please vote. Motion carries 9-2.
Mr. Chairman, may I continue?
Yes, you may.
My second amendment I'd like to propose, it's on page 2 of 2, starting on line 4. I'd like to strike the words, or the Supreme Court decision is not issued. It's the end of line 3, and it continues on to line 4. And I'll make my revisions and then I'll restate it. Okay. So essentially it will read, starting on line 3, in the event the municipality is not able to reach an agreement with the state prior to July 7th, 2014, the referendum shall be presented to the voters at the regular municipal election on April 7th, 2015. And clearly, the court decision, that issue has been resolved, and there needs to be a date inserted there. And so I wanted to make sure that the clerk had time to work that issue should there not be an agreement with the state of Alaska. Or should there be, rather. Sorry.
Okay, we've got a first, a second, no one in the queue. Please vote on the second amendment. Motion carries 8-3. Ms. Dembowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have to amend this. As I have previously indicated, I believe that setting the referendum on the November general election date is appropriate because of the voter turnout as well as other issues that I think would benefit the city. So I'm not going to beat this horse. So I would just like to urge approval. Thank you.
Mr. Honeman.
Well, I speak, and I thank Mr. Bossi for the changes to the ordinances. I think they're germane, sincerely, since with the Supreme Court has ruled. But I will speak in opposition to the actual ordinance, and that is, it's not that it was an epiphany, it's just a reminder of reading back to the charter and our responsibilities and what our local government is supposed to be about, and that's nonpartisan. I recognize that April 2015 versus a November date, which I'm opposed to as well, with this particular delay is just that. You know, we had a petition, a ballot petition process that was followed by the citizens that bothered to have their wherewithal with the ballot petition process. It was presented to the municipality through the clerk's office. It followed the process. The clerk did her job by getting her review by the attorney, of course, and not to repeat everything that went through. We had a couple of court hearings, and now it's very clear that it goes before the ballot. And the ballot that the petitioners, I'm sure, was envisioning and certainly would prefer to choose, and these are our constituents, and these are our voters, and these are people who went forth and gathered the signatures, is at this earliest convenience. And the charter is fairly clear. It's 75 days from when the date is when they're presented, and absent the next closest, next generally scheduled election. So March 31st, I believe, is when after the date after the ruling of the Supreme Court, and April 1st is the next scheduled election. And unless I hear differently, I think that these are the two options that we have. So I'm opposed to this actual ordinance.
Thank you. Mr. Trombley?
Mr. Bosky, you made two amendments. One was on the first page and one was on the second page, correct?
Yes.
In keeping with your amendments, do you have to amend Section 3? Is it possible for a court, Section, I'm looking at, it's not gone. Section 3 is still there. I'm just, in keeping in light with your amendments, does that have to go away? Or Mr. Wheeler, if you could weigh in. Is it possible for a court to invalidate the referendum at this point?
Through the chair, Mr. Trombley, I left open a scenario where if the Assembly were to ever decide between now and November to revisit 37, and there was a dispute about whether or not the referendum was mooted by Assembly action or not, this was sort of a placeholder in case that happens. You could certainly take this out. We can still address it later, but I didn't think it needed to be deleted specifically for what Ms. Demboski was looking to do tonight.
I don't care. I mean, if you think it's fine. I just wanted to make sure that there was consistency. That's all.
Mr. Birch?
I speak in support of the ordinance and the proposal. I think our community issues are best decided at a time when we have a high voter turnout, and clearly November, as demonstrated in our the discussion we've had over the preceding months, has indicated that we see a potential of a 50% turnout of municipal voters in a November election versus as low as a 20% turnout as we experienced last April. So I'm fully supportive of this ordinance and look forward to moving forward with this. Thank you.
Mr. Trainee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May it come as no surprise I'm opposed to this. This is an attempt to get around the public. We've got 22,000 people that signed their name on a petition to vote on this thing. We need to put this up for a vote of the public on the 31st of March or the next day, which would be the 1st of April. This is just a sham, and anybody that votes for this, keep in mind the public's not going to be confused of what you're doing tonight. They're going to vote against you come the April election or turn you out of office. And then we'll come back as a new body and repeal this thing completely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank Ms. Demboski for bringing forward these amendments. It certainly is better than having the election alongside the state's election in November, and certainly quite a bit cheaper. But I have to agree with both Mr. Honeman and Mr. Trainee because, you know, our community came out, they signed their names on a petition, and I think it's a year later still, and they haven't had the opportunity to do what they were told they were going to have the opportunity to do, and that's vote. And what really concerns me more than anything, I think, is that we are spending so much time dealing with this election issue when we got police officers jumping ship on a regular basis. Okay, our community is going to hell in a handbasket, and we're worried about spending as much time as we are on this. We need to worry about protecting our community. I mean, it's open season for our criminals in this community, and I hate to say it, but it's the truth. And I'm just so frustrated that we're wasting so much time on this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Dembowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the eloquence and the passion in which the other members on this body have expressed their views on this matter. But I would like to point out, actually, the charter says 75 days unless the Assembly suspends the ordinance and schedules it for another day. So this is consistent with charter language, Mr. Honeman. And as far as, well, I'll just leave it at that. This is consistent. The April election date is off the table. It was passed and it was vetoed by the mayor. That veto has not been overturned. Therefore, we need to pick a different date. I mean, it's just that simple. And that's why I'm still saying, you know, this is the most viable option, in my humble opinion. So I would just urge approval. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Steele?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. The intent of the charter is clear. They envisioned that folks would, if they rise up and are passionate enough about something, they can go out, gather signatures, and get it on the ballot. The assumption, and I think that's borne out by the 75-day rule, is that it will be held in a timely manner. It is not a timely manner to shift this out until November. People have a right to petition and to get it on the ballot, and this is just wrong. It does not satisfy the intent. It may satisfy the letter, but not the intent of the law.
Mr. Honeman?
Just quickly, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask our Assembly Counsel, who's done some research and review, if she could just briefly, to counter Ms. Dembowski's statement, the ordinance that would have definitively scheduled the election for April might have been vetoed. But we have, as I see it, the three options that were pointed in the charter, and with the Supreme Court ruling, I believe it throws it back to more than one option here. So, Ms. Tucker, if you could indulge us briefly on what the 75-day from the ruling of the Supreme Court versus the next day later, and there may have been some things that you've been reviewing. Is there something that you'll be able to clear? Is April 1st clearly off the table as an option, or March 31st for that matter?
Mr. Honeman, through the chair, I think that Assemblymember Dembowski has not countered at all what you've said. I think that there are several options. The Assembly can repeal the ordinance. That the fact that the Assembly attempted that once and didn't attempt to overrule the mayoral veto of that doesn't preclude the Assembly from doing that again. The Assembly can basically do nothing and force an election within the 75 days. The Assembly can suspend the ordinance to a date certain, as Assemblymember Dembowski has offered, and then hold the election on that date. The Assembly can introduce an ordinance to set a different date along the same lines as Assemblymember Dembowski has, and as the mayor has said before, look to see if the mayor is going to veto it. Absent Assembly action, I think the charter forces the Assembly the clerk to schedule the election within the 75 days or in substantial compliance with that.
Thank you.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Motion carries 6-5.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
move and ask for immediate reconsideration, urge a no vote.
Second.
We got a motion for reconsideration urging a no vote. Please vote. Motion fails 7-4. We now have before us item 11B, AO number 139, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 21, Land Use Planning, new code effective January 1, 2014, regarding utility substations and high voltage transmissions. This item is before the body for action.
Move to approve.
Second.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll just speak briefly to this. It's a modification basically inside Title 21 and also to address an issue out in Chugach Eagle River with a table. Quite frankly, the body already passed this once, but I found the requirement to send her to Planning and Zoning has brought it back to us. So I did that. It went to Planning and Zoning. They approved it, and I just asked that we move this forward.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Motion passes 10 with 10 yes, 1 absent.
And Mr. Chairman, I reconsidered it once, but I'm probably going to need to reconsider this motion as well so we can get this on the books.
Second.
Urge a no vote on reconsideration.
We have a motion and a second to reconsider, urging a no vote. Please vote.
He's learning.
That motion fails 10 with 1 absent. We now have before us under continued public testimony item 13A AO number 60, an ordinance to the Anchorage Municipal Assembly to amend Anchorage Municipal Code and the zoning map of the municipality of Anchorage by enacting a new chapter under Title 21, establishing the Eklutna Village Overlay District. Anyone to testify?
Mr. Chairman, prior to that, I would just like to alert the body as well as the public that it's my intention to postpone action on this. I actually like to keep the public hearing open and move the item back to March at the last meeting in March.
Thank you. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, we will, what's the date you want to continue this to, Mr. Stark?
March 25th, and we'll have an S version that'll come into that. So if we can keep the public hearing open, I'll try to get that in front of the body here pretty quick.
Very good. Any objection? Seeing, hearing none, we will continue this item till March 24th, 25th. Thank you. This next item is also going to be postponed to a later date, but it's posted, so we need to notice it for public testimony if there is any. 13B, AO 132, an ordinance adopting the Anchorage Wetlands Management Plan revision as an element of the comprehensive plan, amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Section 21.05.030D, 21.05.115, and 21.05.130 accordingly, and amending Exhibit A to AO 2013-124S as amended at the new title 21, Section 21.01.080. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body.
Mr. Chairman, I move to postpone to April 22nd.
And continue testimony.
And continue public testimony.
Any objection? Seeing, hearing none, that item will be postponed. Ms. Demboski, did you want to make a motion prior to about reordering? Oh, you're in the queue. Ms.
Yes,
Demboski.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to change the order of the day to bring up item 14Z prior to item 14A. So the representative from the Board of Ethics has an opportunity to testify because of scheduling conflict.
Any objection by the body? Seeing, hearing none, we will reorder the item. We need a second, please. Okay. So we are at C, D.
Z as in zebra.
I think this is the first time we've ever used the entire alphabet. Give me just a moment to get back there. We have before us item 14Z, AO number 1, an ordinance to the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Section 1.15.025H, pertaining to gifts to municipal employees. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all?
Through the chair, I'm Keith Silver. I'm the chair of the Anchorage Board of Ethics, and we've all had meetings together with you folks, and as well as the school district. The school district supports this change, as do we. And I'm here to answer any questions that you might have now, or any of the public, if necessary.
Mr. Honeman.
I just want to thank you and the commission for all the diligent work, and I know that it's been, for lack of better terms, a labor of love. You guys have been really working through this and trying to make sure we get things right. So I appreciate all that.
Thank you.
Mr. Trombley.
Sure. Just for the public to understand, one of the things that this is an issue that has been facing the school district for a long time, accepting gifts, how's that properly handled, but yet the effective date is postponed for, I think, until next school year. If you could just explain why the board decided to postpone it that way.
That was a direct request from the school district. They asked us to do that because they've already gone through the training for this school year, and it would require new training, and the Board of Ethics was not as concerned with the timing as it was with making the change. So we were happy with the July 1 date.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone at all?
Richard Braun. Gifts. 0 gifts. That's the best way to avoid any conflicts. Why do we need gifts to any municipal employee? There's always that ethical question of why, how much, who gets them, who doesn't get them. How about we just 0 gifts? Then there's no question. Why does any municipal employee require gifts to perform their job? 0 gifts. That's what I'd like to see. Then there's no question. And it would sure save a lot of pressure on people who, are you going to give something? Why didn't you give something? All the rest of that stuff. So let's just eliminate them, and then we don't have to worry about them.
Anyone else? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, testimony is closed. Item before the body for action.
Move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Trombley.
I don't think this is going to be a controversial issue for the body, but I did want to mention that the ethics board worked for must have been almost a year on this. Consistent meetings, meeting with the Ethics and Elections Committee, meeting with the school district, and I think that's the deliberative process that we're supposed to take. It's supposed to take a long time. Government shouldn't work fast. And so I'd just like to thank the Ethics Board for being very deliberative. And while this isn't an earth-shattering decision, it still is important and it affects all of us. But again, I like the deliberate process and the methodical way that this was worked through.
Mr. Starr.
I don't want to start the debate if one was already had, but could you summarize the discussion around the ASD acceptance of vendor-provided housing and travel? It's in here. It talks about it as unless specifically referenced in this sections, items such as employee travel discounts, vendor-provided accommodations and training, and payment of employee registration fees shall not be governed by this ethics code. Can you tell me how you arrived at that?
Yeah, Deanne is attorney for the Ethics Board. I think that was all, it's not just for ASD, it's for all employees, that we thought that the travel discounts, contracts that have training provided to our employees was beyond the scope of the Ethics Board, and that should be contained within administrative policies.
You don't anticipate abuse of that being, suggested by a vendor to come on down and visit and play some golf, and I'll show you my new products?
Well, we are concerned with that, but again, the scope of that, so many contracts have training in other parts of the country, excellent networking for our employees that are just came outside of the scope. I think someone can still file a complaint because there is a catch-all section at the beginning that if you look at H2, a municipal employee may not accept a gift if it, under circumstances where the timing or nature would cause a reasonable person to question that person's judgment. So we left a catch-all phrase in there.
You also go on to talk about sort of the financial policies and procedures and guidelines established, perhaps on the executive side of that. Did you look to see what those were? Do they have expense report requirements?
Yes, they do.
Okay, so
there's P&Ps on it.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. That motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14A, AO number 11, an ordinance submitting to the qualified voters of the municipality of Anchorage at the next regular municipal election a ballot proposition amending the Anchorage Municipal Code to allow unsworn police officers to continue to issue parking citations if approved by ordinance and to clarify the appeal process. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all?
Richard Bronigan. If I'm going to get a ticket and pay a fine and have legal repercussions, I want a police officer behind it. Period. Why would we have just anybody issuing parking tickets? I understand probably there's an economic pressure to utilize police officers for other duties, but I think if we're going to fine people, it should be part of their duties, so we know it's right. There's more procedures and policies with them than there will be a parking enforcement agency. I don't think that worked out a few years back too good. We're heading down that road again.
Anyone else? Anyone at all? This item is closed for public testimony and before the body for...
Move to approve.
Mr. Honeman.
Yes, sir. Just an answer to Mr. Braun and to the public, and then I'd ask that the chief, if he's still in the audience, he might be able to come forward and explain just a few more things. But just briefly in the history, years back, the Anchorage Police Department did primarily all of its parking sites through the issuance of meter maids, particularly in the downtown area. And when they went away from the meter maids for expenses and contracted to a parking authority, there was the issue that brought about this charter change, which created this confusion. And so with that, and I'll make full disclosure, my first job at the Anchorage Police Department was as a community service officer, as a CSO, and I was one of these particular employees. And it's not moving citations at all. It's a fine-only parking citation, and it was issued after just as much of an investigation a police officer did. So, Chief, is there's something in this particular ordinance change that I know that was needed some further explanation, and appreciate the presentation of the Public Safety Committee.
Mr. Hall, Mr. Hahnemann, thank you for having me up here. Yes, in general terms, what I want to make sure everybody understands is this isn't changing anything. what's happened is Alaska Police Standards Council has revoked the certification of the people currently doing the traffic enforcement outside of the downtown area. Actually, they do the stuff inside the downtown area that the current contractor can't do, and then they do all the traffic enforcement outside the downtown area. But the APSC won't let them do that anymore. So we have to do one of two things: either quit writing parking tickets, which we have done. We have not been writing parking tickets in Anchorage for about 3 months, or we have to turn that over to fully sworn police officers. So the reason this came about was because initially when Prop 3 passed many years ago, we brought our CSOs who were writing the tickets in. We sent them to an academy. We gave them a gun so they could qualify. We had them take an oath. We made them police officers. Then we took away their gun, gave them back their light blue uniform, telling them don't ever arrest anybody, don't behave like a police officer, and we still paid them at the lower rate, and they were a police officer in name only. That worked until the APSC figured out that they hadn't been police officers acting as police officers for more than 5 years, and they decertified them all. So we're done. We're out of the parking business unless we make this change. Or, in that case, we have to otherwise find more cops and go out and actually have full-time police officers enforcing traffic laws. And I'm not aware of any jurisdiction in the country that does their parking detail that way. I should point out to you that there are a couple things in here that need elaboration and one place of correction. If you look at the AO, second paragraph, we're in the whereases here. It refers to peace officers who met the standards of the Alaska Police Standards Council. That should be read in the context of the standards for police officer by the Alaska Police Standards Council. That's a little bit vague, and the Police Standards Council doesn't deal with peace officers. And then the next paragraph where it says the APSC has stated it will no longer certify peace officers who are not regular police officers. That's true, but it's in the context of the standards for police officers. And then the only other thing that I wanted to mention is in the statement of economic effect, there's a misprint. If you look there, you will see a chart that lays out $40,000 per year for the next 5 years. But in the narrative down below, in the small print, it says $50,000 per year. That $50,000 is a typo. The $40,000 is correct. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, Mr. Starr.
Chief, this also goes on the ballot, too. That's the other half of what we do. This charter language change goes in front of the voters in April. So you need to bridge from now until April as well, as what you're also asking us to do, right?
Right. We will not be having the CSOs writing parking tickets between now and the election. It would be illegal for us to do that.
Right. So we'll create the ballot language, which is part of this, and you're confident with the way the ballot language is there to present your case that this is a good change?
Yes, I think I'm probably going to be in the position where I can't advise voters on what to do, so I hope you folks will help take that up. And I think the challenge will be getting people to understand this is not going back to a contract parking situation like we had downtown many years ago. This is doing things exactly how we've been doing them in the way that nobody's been complaining about. So.
Yep. Well, we'll get in front of the voters, and hopefully they reinforce your position. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no one else in the queue, so I would suggest that we clean this language up per the Chief's request.
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that if you can give me a few minutes to consult with the municipal legal to make sure that we're in accordance with changing if we just bring this up again as soon as we get the, if we can just.
Let's do. We'll do that. We'll bring this back.
Mr. Wheeler, if it's possible, Mr. Chairman might be able to answer the question. Okay. Would it be possible without substantially changing the ordinance if I just change the two words, peace to police, on line 22 and then again on line 27?
Yes, sir.
So I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. Everyone, please vote on that amendment. And the
Mr. Honeman, you should change the SEE too if you're going to.
I didn't see it on my SEE, the 50. I see the 40.
First paragraph. Last line.
Oh, I see. Actually, in the actual paragraph. I make the motion we change the last line on paragraph 1 under the public sector economic effects. So the cost increase would be at least $40,000 per year.
Correct. Second.
Make the motion.
A motion and a second for an amendment. Please vote.
And then lastly, Mr. Chairman, if I might, as to the whole charter, the Public Safety Committee, if you remember, did take this issue up several months back at its meeting, and we did support at that time the change to the charter. And so I recommend the body of the whole that we put this before the voters on the ballot.
Thank you. No one else in the queue, please vote on this as amended. We've got 10 in favor, 1 no. We have before us item 14B, OR 15. It's a ordinance providing for submission to the qualified voters of Anchorage, Alaska, the question of the issuance of not to exceed $650,000 of general obligation bonds of the municipality of Anchorage to pay the cost of public safety facilities, police, and related capital improvements in the Anchorage Metropolitan Police Service Area at the election to be held in the municipality on April 1st, 2014. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all?
Richard Braun. I'm glad the way you guys got this grouped. Get this over. This one and the subsequents that are coming up represents a substantial increase for tax cap. I'm generally opposed to raising the tax cap. I think we should live within it. So I guess you know how I'll vote on these. But I'm kind of curious. I think there's been some discussions, especially with ASD, about maybe a building fund that's available and can be recycled and do repairs like a new furnace. Is that kind of what the fire department or the police department's getting, a new furnace? Why isn't that a maintenance item? We have an O&M budget. Why isn't something in the O&M budget that we don't have to do a bond, increase the tax cap, go through all that? That's just a general question I'd like to, hopefully maybe somebody can address between this item and the ones subsequent that also raise the tax cap. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone at all?
Good evening. My name is Phil Isley, I-S-L-E-Y, and I was listening to you guys, and you mentioned that we have so many police officers that are leaving. And if all these police officers are leaving, why are we going to spend all this money to fix their stuff if there's not going to be anybody there? It's just kind of a question.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Gray Jackson.
If I may, since I made that comment, we anticipate filling positions so we have enough police officers to protect our citizens in this community.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Second question I have is, I noticed that you close the testimony and then you have somebody get up that basically testifies, and where if I heard them during the testimony, I might get up and testify because I'd have questions. It seems to me if you have the testimony open, we'd all come by and testify instead of closing the testimony and then bringing somebody up to testify. Just a thought.
Anyone else? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is closed for public testimony before the body for...
Move to approve.
Mr. Trombley?
Mr. Vakelis, could you answer Mr. Braun's question as to why we are bonding for a new boiler? as opposed to being part of our maintenance.
Through the chair, this is an upgrade and a replacement of the HVAC, and our accounting policies enable us to capitalize that, and so bonding is a good source of funding for capital items.
Thank you, Ms. Mahoney.
That is correct. There are other sources, but this is the source that we have selected for this particular item.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. That item carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14C, AO number 16, a ordinance providing for the submission to the qualified voters of Anchorage, Alaska, the question of the issuance of not to exceed $1,950,000 of general obligation bonds of the municipality of Anchorage to pay the cost of fire protection capital improvements in the Anchorage Fire Service area at the election to be held in the municipality on April 1, 2014. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all?
Richard Brown again. Just to continue that conversation a little bit, these are new trucks, I believe. Neither one of these issues was, that I could tell, is of an emergency nature, where it has to be done quicker than if you to go through the normal budgeting process to handle it. It would seem like with all that we do with the budget, the discussions we have, the reviews that they're done, why aren't these things forecasted so they can be part of a budget and fit into in a normal manner rather than have to be handled by an additional bond? Because raising the tax cap every time we want something, that's to me not good management as far as how the city should be approaching their business. It's not a way a business would approach it. I don't think they go out and say, well, we need a new whatchamacallit, so we're going to double our prices for next week. I just don't think that would work for them, and I don't see raising the tax cap all the time being good for us.
Anyone else? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony is closed.
Move to approve.
Before the body.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Honeman.
I was going to make a comment to in reference to Mr. Bronze, and it's my understanding, Ms. Mahoney, if you could help me on this, is that for this year, the bonds that are coming before the voters, which of course you'll have an opportunity to vote up or down on, will not exceed the bonded amount that's already indebted. So as far as the tax cap goes, for these purposes, may or may not be exceeding the current cap. So, Ms. Mahoney, is that correct?
Through the chair, the mayor is recommending, and your CFO, that the Assembly approve item 14G, which would make that statement true. If 14H is approved, we would be exceeding the amount of principal that we pay off.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Starr?
Through the chair, Mr. Vacalis, typically we have to place an order for a fire truck, and so we don't have to pay for it for a while. We don't sell our bonds until we do. Is this truck already been ordered?
No, sir. We would not be able to order it unless we were sure that we had a funding source. The other thing is, as you recall, we do have a phasing plan for the replacement of these apparatus, and this is just fulfilling part of that phasing plan.
What's the lead-in on a fire truck this size, ladder truck in particular?
It's about a year, sir.
Yeah, so we'll sell these bonds probably in a year or so then, likewise?
I would anticipate, I'll ask the CFO that.
Not to be holding you to it, but we typically don't raise the tax cap burden until the bonds are sold. Likely.
That's correct. We don't sell the bonds until we need the cash.
Yeah, and that, to affect the mill rate, then obviously we have one chance to do that, so we likely won't raise the tax cap, particularly if Mr. Braun's wording. We won't raise the tax cap this year, likely because we won't sell these $2 million worth of bonds.
That's correct. Just to clarify, the tax cap is raised based on actual annual debt, not based on anticipated debt.
Sure.
Approved by the voters.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14D, AO number 17, an ordinance providing for the submission to the qualified voters of Anchorage, Alaska, the question of the issuance not to exceed $2,550,000 of general obligation bonds of the municipality of Anchorage to pay the cost of construction, renovating, and equipment, park, trail improvements, and recreation facilities, and the question of an increase in the municipal tax cap limitation to pay associated operations and maintenance cost in the Anchorage Parks and Recreation Services area without
reading, Mr.
cost.
Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. This is before us for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is closed for public testimony before the body for action. Okay, Mr. Flynn.
Probably need a second first. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'd asked a question previously and made a request when we first heard about this idea of a dog park at Valley of the Moon Park, is what the engagement plan was with South Addition Community Council. I still don't have an answer to that. Has anyone actually addressed South Addition Community Council yet?
Through the chair, Mr. Flynn. Yes, there has been dialogue with South Addition Community Council and the residents in the area. And predominantly the biggest issue that has come before us is because of the parking problems along 16th Avenue. I think everybody knows that. And all it takes is one small event, parking lot's full, 16th Avenue is clogged. The people are trying to get over to use the dog park, use the facilities. I mean, it's a great area, it's lacking. And so we actually have a drawn-out concept plan that Stephen Rafuse, who in our department is actually presenting to South Addition. And they've had conversations about it before, we've heard it. But as far as a formal presentation of a concept based on what we think we can do after consulting with traffic in other areas, that has not been done, but it's been an open dialogue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Starr.
You're standing up here, so I'll ask you the question. Sometime back, Ms. Osiander put in, I believe she actually changed the code language that references the Anchorage Parks in Anchorage proper as the Anchorage Bowl Parks and Rec. Do you remember that conversation?
The conversation in the context of what specifically?
Well, in this one here, we don't specifically say Anchorage Bowl Parks and Rec. Ms. Osiander did that, I believe, on purpose, so that there was a distinction between the Anchorage parks that perhaps were in Chugiak Eagle River. So this language doesn't reference that Anchorage Bowl Parks and Rec. The specific language, the literary term, I'm almost certain that we changed code to specify that your parks district is known as the Anchorage Bowl Parks and Rec.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Starr, through the chair. I didn't catch that specifically. I was more concerned with making sure that the identity and costs associated with the service areas, that they were excluded from.
Yeah, we've always traditionally made sure that Chugiak Eagle River doesn't have the burden of it. But Mr. Wheeler, perhaps you can help me. Did we specify, thank you, Mr. Rada, did we specify some time back that we were going to reference that as Anchorage Bowl?
Through the chair, Mr. Starr, the code that's online says Anchorage Parks and Recreation Service Area. So if there was an amendment after 95, it's not showing here.
Okay. Well, then maybe I'm mistaken, but I thought we had put that extra language in there. Thank you.
Mr. Steele?
Yeah, Mr. Rada got away without me being able to query him. Is the language in here with regards to the dugouts? People using that park now as a dog park are concerned about either filling them or closing them off or something so that people don't hide in there and or sleep in there or whatever. There are dugouts in this particular ball field. Are they going to be taken care of one way or another to make that conversion whole?
Yes, through the chair, Mr. Steele. The general concept is basically we're going to expand the parking to the east. Will be off of 16th Avenue where the pathway connects over to the trail to the creek. On the other side, we'll extend parking over. Parking will go to the corner, and we'll create additional parking, overflow parking, if you will, which is badly needed already, and the dog park will then be to the south of that location. There will be no dugouts, but it'll be a fenced dog park.
Same place, a little bit smaller than what is currently fenced, or?
Don't know the exact dimensions at the time. I want to accommodate the parking first because of the problems down there, and we've got plenty of space to go south, and we've got a footprint, and whatever we identify to clear, that's what we'll do.
Well supported by the neighbors.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Trainee?
Just I thank the administration for bringing this thing forward to us, and thank you, John, for your work on the doggy park there. We're going to be heading down to Juneau because this bond issue goes to public and also requires state participation. We'll be going down there trying to get money from Juneau to make that happen. So thank you, the administration.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe the title's fine because thanks to Ms. Osiander's diligence, we have two service areas, the Eagle River Parks and Recreation Service Area and the Anchorage Parks and Recreation Service Area.
We have three.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson. If I may, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Johnson, I'm so sorry I left out Girdwood. Anyway, I just wanted to make that point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14E, AO number 18, an ordinance providing for the submission to the qualified voters of the municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, the question of the issuance of not to exceed $5,550,000 of general obligation bonds to the municipality of Anchorage to pay the cost of area-wide facilities capital improvement projects to include public facilities, security upgrades, Chester Creek Sport Complex, parking lot expansion, and Mulcahy Stadium relocation, City Hall safety improvements, like Lusac Library renovation improvements, improvements to the Anchorage Golf Course and related capital improvements, and the question of the increase in the municipal tax cap limitations to pay associated operations and maintenance costs at the election to be held in the municipality on April 1st, 2014. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony is closed before the body. Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14F, AO number 19, an ordinance providing for the submission to the qualified voters of the municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, the question of the issuance not to exceed $1,793 of general obligation bonds of the municipality of Anchorage to pay the cost of area-wide safety and public transportation improvements and related capital improvements, and the question to increase in the municipal tax cap limitation to pay associated operations and maintenance costs at the election to be held in the municipality on April 1, 2014. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, testimony is closed. Items before the body. Move to approve. Mr. Trainee.
Mr. Chairman, looking at this, I understand part of the money goes for dam rehabilitation, $200,000. Where is that? Where are those dams at? Are those in Eagle River or here on this side of Anchorage? Do we know which dams?
Sir, as the body approved last year, we put money into this so that we can do assessments area-wide of the bridges and dams, and then based on the service area, if there's repairs that need to be made, then that's how you'd account for the actual work to be done.
Thanks,
But this is
I just want to make sure we're going all the way from Girdwood to the other end.
We are.
Pierce Creek area. I'll make sure we're not leaving any dam without inspections.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote.
Ms. Johnston.
Item carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14G, AO number 20, an ordinance providing for the submission to the qualified voters of Anchorage, Alaska, the question of issuance of not to exceed $20,200,000 of general obligation bonds to the municipality of Anchorage to pay the cost of road, storm, drainage, and related capital improvements, and question of an increase in the municipal tax cap limitation to pay associated operations and maintenance costs in the Anchorage roads and drainage service area at the election to be held on the municipality on April 1, 2014. This item is before the body for public testimony.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, members of the Assembly, my name is Tom McGrath. I have a question first. 14G and 14H seem to be identical except for $3 million for Spenard Road. So would it be appropriate for me to testify now or a minute from now, or are you going to combine these?
Can I jump in here, Mr. Chairman?
Pardon?
May I jump in here, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Flynn, would you please?
So, Mr. McGrath, the question is, which version do we adopt? And the idea is if we adopt this one, then we will use AMAT's allocation to fill the gap that would otherwise be filled with bond dollars.
Okay.
So if we do 14G, we go for AMATs for the money. If we do 14H, we're use bond money.
And my testimony really doesn't have to do with either one. I just want to make a statement about Spenard Road. Somebody asked a question a little bit ago about the associated operation and maintenance costs at the election to be held in the municipality. Yes, we do pay off the bonds, but the associated operation and maintenance costs go on forever. So we do increase and pyramid the cost to the taxpayers of Anchorage by approving these bonds. On the 14G and 14H, the Spenard corridor has $3 million in one of these. And over the last couple of years, the Assembly Chair, Mr. Hall, has been working very diligently to try to get in a consensus of the people on Spenard Road about what to do with Spenard Road. Mr. Steele has also been active. The mayor has been active. And I almost agreed that maybe there was a consensus except for about a dozen business people along there, except that then Mr. Toadbush from the planning department came to Spenard here a couple of months ago, and he said, we really need to have a Spenard corridor plan. And we have a South Spenard corridor plan that was done back in the 80s. And so now we're going to maybe do a Spenard corridor plan in the future sometime. And is that after we build the road that may be in accordance with the plan that we're going to do in the future? Or are we going to do a plan after we do the road and then have to redo the road? So, we've been talking about this since 1993. That was the first time I went to a meeting about rebuilding Spenard Road. And every time it seems like we're almost to a consensus that we should do something, somebody else throws another wrench into it. So if we do rebuild Spenard Road, whether we do it with bond money, state money, AMAT's money, I hope we're awfully sure that we're doing what we want to do so that we don't have to redo it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steele, did you have a question?
I guess I have a comment more. I appreciate your testimony and all the work that you've done with regards to Spenard area and Spenard Road. It's my understanding that the corridor plan has kind of been introduced and is getting started. Again, it's a redo of an existing corridor plan that I think was done back in the 90s when they did the first part of the project. And I don't see something.
Well, the first part was done back in the early 80s when we redid Spenard Road from the railroad tracks down to International Airport Road.
What they're doing is just trying to update that.
Right. And also, part of this was supposed to be envisioned in the Midtown plan, and the Midtown plan, which is part of the 2020 plan, was never completed either. So we're kind of being shortchanged, and we don't really have a plan for where we may spend $30 million.
I'm not sure that the Spenard area is all in agreement with anything. Spenard folks tend to think out of the box, and folks in planning, I feel sorry for them. They think they've got agreement and got a plan to go away and come back a few months later when they're trying to get funding or years. And they find that everybody's still got issues with what's going on.
But it is the place in Anchorage where people want to come and develop and also build restaurants, and it's a great place to do business.
And my concern is that we got to get it done. I mean, we've been working on this segment for 10 years.
20.
Yeah, and it just, there's almost agreement, like you said. There's still a few holdouts and a few little issues that they're still working on. That's why they've got this citizens group, and they're having their meetings, and they're talking about it. And hopefully by the time the cement is dry, folks will agree on it. In terms of the G and the H, the two components, the one has $3 million specifically in there. We were trying to fulfill an agreement that we had or a discussion we had with the legislature in terms of us having the skin in the game and so on and so forth. But it was pointed out to me by folks that have been here longer than I have that the AMATS money is our money, and so that's a viable way to also have some additional skin in the game. We currently have $1.9 million that's being used for the planning effort, buying some components of right-of-way and that type of thing. So they're doing the planning process now, and hopefully we're going to be down in Juneau and talking with folks to try and get the funding. Once we have the funding, hopefully we'll all come to whatever agreement before we put it on the ground. But appreciate your commitment.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Richard Braun. I'm not a resident or a business person on Spenard, but I'm a kind of heavy user. There's still talk going on, and there's this new planning that's going to start of going from 4 to 3 lanes. Don't do it. It's a busy road. There's a lot of traffic. I cannot see how a 3-lane situation is going to enhance the ability to get down Spenard Road compared to 2 sets of 2 lanes, total of 4. So I just want to put a plug in and maybe help Tom with the last 12 holdouts that 4 lanes, not 3.
Anyone else? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony is closed. Items before the body for action. Mr. Trombley.
Mr. Flynn, you're on AMATS. In your opinion, is the money that we can utilize through AMATS enough skin in the game to go to Juneau and request additional dollars? I know that's one of the reasons why we bond for stuff, and Mr. Steele touched on that. But do you feel as though that's adequate in AMATS to not have to go with the item 14H?
Thank you, Mr. Trombley. I'd offer a 2-part answer to that question. First off is, as Mr. Steele pointed out, this is the municipality's allocation. The ultimate source is federal dollars, trickles down through the state. So I think that our commitment to using our portion of the allocation is part of the skin in the game. And the other piece is we have almost $1.6 million in previously approved bond funds that are being utilized as a local match to this project. That's on this matrix that I asked Ms. Mahoney to prepare for us. Thank you, Ms. Mahoney. Thought this would be helpful. And so I'm comfortable with the G version. And however, if we pass it, then the next task is to have Mr. Lyon prepare for us a resolution of the Assembly asking that the TIP be amended to reflect this change. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Birch?
Yes, I'd also comment with respect to our discussion in AMATS. I think this is an appropriate measure. I think 14G basically speaks to the responsibility we have as an assembly and administration to try to live within our means and keep the bonded indebtedness below what we retire every year. So I think this is a good effort, and I think it's a good solution, and I concur with Mr. Flynn's suggestion. Thank you.
Mr. Steele?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out a couple other things. One is the going down the hill. I think that portion was done with local money. the first phase, and we also have used some funds to acquire some right-of-way in the area that have already been expended to match up 27th, and there's some other expenditures going on right now. So there, we do have skin in the game. Plus, we've been planning this effort for 20 years. So,
seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item number 14H, AO number 21, an ordinance providing for the submission to the qualified voters of Anchorage, Alaska. The question, thank you. Item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony is closed. Before
Move
the
to
body
postpone indefinitely.
Yes. Got a motion to postpone indefinitely. Any objection? Seeing, hearing none, this item is postponed indefinitely. We have before us item 14I, AO number 25, and an ordinance submitting to the qualified voters residing in the South Golden View Rural Road Service Area and Loma. Thank you. Really, thank you.
Trust me, if you're anybody out there listening, that was a good move.
This item is before us for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony is closed. Items before the body for action.
Move to postpone indefinitely.
We have a motion to postpone indefinitely. Mr. Starr, do you want to speak to this?
I do. Ms. Johnston, some of the advantages of a combined service district in all the fragmented ones that potentially are up on the upper hillside, is there ever an indication that your community would like to start to see some of those come together for consolidation of services and financial gains?
I'm not sure if you remembered, but we passed the Hillside District Commission, Road and Drainage Advisory Commission, and they are having a meeting on Wednesday. It's going to take a while, but yes, they're making a stab at it. And just for your information on this group right here, it's adjacent, and so they're going to work it out with the Road Service District so it doesn't have to go to the ballot.
Yeah, I understand the politics of the area, though the urging in your leadership would perhaps show them the benefits of it. And I don't mean to compare.
And it's been, and I've been out there pushing. It is going to take a long time because there's a lot of independent road service districts. There's a lot of roads that have not been maintained, and new people have moved there, and all of a sudden they find out that they have crappy road, and so it's not easy.
I get that, and it's just frustrating to also remind them that we basically have one crack a year to do it when it goes on the ballot, because it does require a ballot petition to do it. Thank you.
Okay, we got a motion to postpone indefinitely. Any objection from the body? Seeing, hearing none, that item is postponed indefinitely. We have before us item 14J, AO number 12, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, section 28.20.010 to require two-thirds majority vote to change the date of regular municipal elections. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all?
Mr. Chairman, could we be advised, are we anticipating keeping the public hearing open on this and moving this item for further discussion amongst the...
We are.
Where are we heading with that?
March 25th.
Thank you.
Mr. Trombley, could you take the chair for a minute?
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Joelle Hall, and I just would like to say thank you. I completely agree. Looking forward to having two-thirds to move the assembly elections. That would be nifty. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to testify?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Assembly, my name is Tom McGrath. This is okay, but I think you can't do it just by changing municipal code. The charter says a regular election shall be held annually on the first Tuesday in October, and of course that's been changed unless otherwise specified by ordinance. So it's your job to change the date of the election. So I think it has to be a charter change before you change the code. You know, if you just change the code and don't change the charter, you know, the charter came first. You know, that chicken and the egg thing. So I think that if you do go forward with this, I would suggest that you do the complete change rather than part of the change, so that next year we don't have to hire two sets of attorneys to fight about it. Thank you.
There are no questions. Anyone else to testify?
Richard Braun. Why? That's the main question I've got here. What are we solving here? It takes a simple majority before, right? Or existing as of today. What's wrong? What are you fixing, Dick? Can I get a little more explanation on it before I could
Mr. Trainee does
understand
have,
what's going on and say yay or nay?
Mr. Trainee does have a question.
No, we're going to make a motion after this, continue it till the 25th, so that's all right. It was not for him.
Okay.
I think the rest of the public might like a little explanation too. This is a good time.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Braun, you've repeatedly asked us to kind of weigh in and engage the public in our protocols. As you know from our meetings, we typically don't do that. It's an opportunity for the Assembly to hear from the public on matters in front of us, and so that's not to. It would be an opinionated statement if I told you what we were trying to do in terms of that. I will tell you we are considering it at a later date for action, which is March 25th proposed. So not to be flippant with you, it's just we don't start that process of debate. So the idea for the public information is that we listen now.
I didn't want to debate. I just wanted to find out why. I couldn't get a copy of what the full wording is because there's none back there. Pardon me. And so I thought maybe I'd get a little explanation and see if I'm for it or against it. Thank you.
Anyone else to testify? Anyone at all? Ms. Dombrowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move to continue public testimony on this item to March 25th, 2014.
Second.
If you could push your button, it would be appreciated.
Let people push their button.
Any objection? All right.
The clerk has asked that we please vote on that. Well, there was no objection. We will postpone this to the meeting of March 25th
of March.
25th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. We now have before us item 14K, AO number 5, an ordinance approving acquisition of real property adjacent to Old Eagle River Road for a purchase price not to exceed $452,000 plus closing costs. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony is closed. Item is before the body for action.
Move to approve.
Second.
Seeing no one, Ms. Dembowski?
Again, we have one of those rare opportunities, Mr. Chairman. I just want to, again, and I actually have done something that I haven't done before, but I sent the administration an email this morning. I had requested some information from AWWU on this topic, and the level of engagement, the attention to detail, and just was incredible. And I think, Mr. Vikalis, your department should be commended for the job well done, and I really do appreciate it. Every time I engage with that department, I'm hard to please, even harder to impress, and they have impressed me. So I just wanted to just give them a kudos and recommend approval.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14L, AO number 6, an ordinance authorizing the disposal of 4 sanitary sewer easements located on a portion of Track A, Lake Otis and Tudor subdivision between Hadar, Trunker, and Anchorage water, and wastewater utility. The item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony is closed. Items before the body for action.
Move to approve.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Motion carries unanimously. We have before us now item 14M, AO number 7, an ordinance authorizing disposal of perpetual waterline easement through portions of Heritage Land Bank parcels number 1-085U, V, Y, Z, and ZZ, located between the Glen Highway and Yosemite Drive in Eagle River to Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item, testimony is closed. Item before the body.
Move to approve.
We got a second. Mr. Starr?
Through the chair, Mr. Vacalis, there's a roads and drainage concern, particularly voiced by Representative Fairclough about some drainage paths and plans for that area. Is this a potential area that we would use in the future to address some of the upgrade requirements at Yosemite Drive? Is this good business, do you think?
I'll ask the Public Works Director, but I do not believe that this affects that whatsoever, sir, but I'll ask the Public Works Director.
Why are we doing it? Perhaps you can answer me that.
Yes, because it is currently being requested to be used by another element, and the real estate can go ahead and discuss that with you. They've been negotiating on this for some time.
Who's the other element?
The element's already in place.
No, I guess there was another party that's interested in the easement. This is an abandonment of a easement. And so what I'm concerned about is that we're giving away a waterline easement through an area we may need in the future. So if we don't know, I don't want you to
We might
guess.
want to talk to Tammy.
Ms. Oswald, the nice piece about this easement is it connects from Yosemite Drive all the way over to the Glen. It already exists. And we have some road and drainage issues, particularly we've been taken all the way to the Supreme Court on Yosemite Drive. My challenge is that is there not a reason to keep this? And if we are abandoning it, disposing of it per se, why are we? So two questions there. Should we give it away, and why are we giving it away?
We're not giving it away. We're just taking it and consummating it into giving it to AWU.
To who?
AWWU.
I get that part, but you're giving it to them, and what are they going to do with it? So, I mean, you're saying HLB has the easement and you're disposing of it, and they're taking it over. So that's the other party. That's right?
Correct.
Okay. What are they going to do with it?
They're going to maintain it?
They're not going to abandon it?
No.
Okay. So the properties to the north there then aren't going to take this land and expand their footprint?
No.
Okay. That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Ms. Dembowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see a representative from AWW here, Mr. Voss. Could you just come forward for a second?
Yes, thank you.
Are you familiar with the drainage issues on Yosemite Drive that Mr. Starr was referencing?
For the record, my name is Kurt Voss, Engineering Director at AWW. Yes, we are familiar with those drainage issues, although AWW directly is not involved in the drainage itself. And if I might, to also reconfirm what Mr. Starr said, the water main exists, goes through that area right now. We have had an intergovernmental permit. An easement will just allow us to maintain that existing water main that was installed about 2008, 2009, and we intend to do that on a permanent basis.
Okay, and moving forward, as we work with the state to address the issues on Yosemite Drive, AWWU may become involved in this issue because you're getting really close. You are committed to work proactively with the neighbors to help mitigate any issues if your easement becomes part of the problem or maybe part of a solution?
Through the chair, Mr. Dembowski, we will always work proactively, and to the degree that there is an issue related to the easement that affects drainage, we will certainly pay attention and deal with those issues as we have everywhere else where we have water main infrastructure throughout the community.
Okay, that satisfies me. Thank you.
Mr. Starr?
And not to beat it down, is this the water line that went under the Glen? Is that the same area we're talking about?
Through the chair, Mr. Starr, yes.
Okay, I get it, and I appreciate your attitude towards helping. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. That motion carries 10 in favor, 1 absent. We now have before us item 14N, AO number 8, an ordinance authorizing the disposal of a perpetual drainage easement across Heritage Land Bank, parcel 5-002A, a portion of Lot 3, ASLS 97-10, located at the southwest corner of Raspberry Road and Minnesota Drive, to Project Management and Engineering. Item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony is closed. Items before the body for action.
Move to approve.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Motion passes 10 in favor, 1 absent. We now have before us item 14O, AO number 9, a ordinance authorizing the non-competitive disposal of a perpetual drainage easement across Heritage Land Bank, parcel 1-091, legally described as Tract B, Spring Creek subdivision, located near the Ptarmigan Valley Trailhead and adjacent to Amundsen Road in Peters Creek, to Project Management and Engineering. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony closed. Item before the body.
Second.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14P, AO number 10, an ordinance authorizing disposal of real property for fair market value located at 12,001 Business Boulevard in Eagle River and legally described as Condominium Unit 3, Eagle River Town Center, Tract K, Regional Park Unit number 2 subdivision. Item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony is closed. Items before the body.
Move to approve.
Mr. Starr.
Ms. Oswald, can we talk about this in public in terms of the buy and sell agreement, in terms of purchase price and who's buying it yet?
I think that's a no, Mr. Starr.
I get it. Here's my only challenge is, and I don't want a strip club to go in there. And I mean, that's my challenge, is it's time for the community to weigh in on it. How do we know? I mean, I've been patient here, but we...
Mr. Starr, I'm Robin Ward. I'm with the Real Estate Department.
Recognize you. You know this project.
I know it really well. And first, let me say it's about time.
I agree.
We do have within the bylaws the declaration of the Owners Association. It has to be a compatible use, and so there are very few uses, frankly, that can go in there. The entity that has made the letter of intent does meet those retail compatibility.
This is a public-private partnership that has Alaska Club as also an owner of this building. Have they been engaged?
Absolutely. In fact, the Alaska Club is actually the chair and is in charge in managing the negotiations in the contract.
And I understand that. I don't want to have to go into executive session or anything like that, but we've got issues, interfund loans and payoff balances and things like that that are going to clean up our side of the book, so we don't yearly have to support that. So hopefully that we can get to that point as well. So I'll urge approval and we'll get going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. No one else in the queue, please vote. Motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14Q, AR number 14, a resolution revising the improved 2014 General Government Capital Improvement Budget Program. Item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony is closed. Items before the body. Ms. Mahoney.
Through the chair. With all due respect, I think that this is a good idea in concept. However, tonight we just changed our bond program. We've reduced it from $35 million down to $33 million. And then I guess my point is that our capital budget changes throughout the year. And it could be that voters don't pass one of the ballot props that we propose to them. So my question to you would be then, at that point in time, would we submit another one of these documents? And then let's say we don't get a lot of our legislative grants and our legislative funding that is on the third column on here. And then at that point, do we change the numbers? It's a question I don't know the answer to, but I do know that currently this particular document would need to be updated to reflect at least where we are today. And my intent is not to be critical at all of this, because I do think it is really well intended, but it's just my due diligence to tell you that we would need to make some adjustments.
Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Mahoney, I really appreciate your comment and what you have to say in this regard. But even before your time with the municipality of Anchorage, this is a procedure that has been done throughout the years, and it's a requirement by charter and or code. And I don't bring forward documents just for the heck of it as an exercise. I bring it forward because I simply want to do the right thing and follow the rules and follow the code. And if you look up a little history, you'll see that this is how it's been done in the past and how it should be done. And it's a charter, as I said, charter and or code requirement. Just like when we changed the operating budgets for general government and revise them and utilities, there's a revision that comes before the Assembly that we have to approve that's required. And that's the reason why this is being brought forward. No other reason. Again, thank you for your comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Starr?
Well, I actually concur a little bit here, Ms. Gray-Jackson. So on really our packet in page 302, the table of revised projects or the additional projects is your emphasis of what you'd want to see, particularly for your district. Is that kind of the gist of why you're moving the action, is to rework the capital spending plan?
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, you may.
This document is not about projects that are just in my district. It's a process.
Yeah.
We revise the capital budget when we approve the legislative program. And this is just, following the rules. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
To that end, Ms. Mahoney, our front page there, the AR in particular, 299, does in fact have incorrect, based on what we previously approved. For example, line 39 on the first page references the drainage bond package. Is it appropriate to give you the jurisdiction to clean that up? The intent is here, I think, on our body, and I agree with Ms. Gray-Jackson here.
No, I mean, we would be very, very happy to go in and make the updates, especially incorporating the changes that occurred tonight.
Sure.
And then what we could do is we could indicate that this is the capital budget as of this date.
Yes.
Recognizing that there will be changes going forward.
Yeah, I'd like to do that if you can support us in that change and approve it tonight. Can you work with that, or do you want to bring it back revised?
There were other legislative items that were added to our legislative program, which are therefore added to our capital budget that would need to be incorporated in this as well. What I would suggest is we could postpone this to your next meeting, and then what we could do is go back and correct some of the numbers, and then you can approve it next session, next meeting.
I'm trying to remember that discussion, Ms. Mahoney, the items that aren't included in this. Do you know some of them offhand?
Yes, I do.
We're talking specific changes to the legislative program, sort of as amended, is what you just said, right?
Yeah, there were some changes made by you all in regard to the legislative program, and some other changes that are in the document.
Right,
Yeah.
I know it. I just can't remember them that aren't
Right.
included in here. So if you knew, are they significant in number?
No, they are not.
Okay. Yeah. Ms. Gray Jackson, is that appropriate to just defer it till they can clean it up and add the other ones as well?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Starr, that's fine with me. Thank you, Ms. Mahoney. Thank you, Mr.
Do
Chairman.
you want to make the motion then to, we obviously don't need to continue a public hearing. You just want to take action at a further date?
Mr. Starr, you can make the motion.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there anybody else in the queue, Mr. Chairman?
No, just Ms. Gray Jackson. If you'd like to make the motion, Mr.
Yeah, move to postpone action on the item until, let's do April 8th. Is that appropriate? Ms. Mahoney, do you have, it gives you a little bit of time?
And we can have it done by the next meeting, February 11th.
I'm only asking, is there any reason to change the legislative program again now that Juno's seen it and some of that? It would, yes, we don't have to do this every time. I know.
I mean, it's going to change.
Well, it's not a flippant statement. As Miss Osiander and I did it for the fire station, for example. Once Juno got down there, we did this very thing. So it was helpful to have it. But I'm happy bringing it back next meeting. Miss Gray Jackson's worked hard on doing it. So
Yes. No,
we'll bring it back. Move to postpone until February 25th, next meeting.
February 11th.
Or 11th. Lost date.
Second.
Any objection to the postpone to the next meeting? Seeing, hearing none, that item will be postponed to February the 11th. We now have before us item 14R, AO number 13, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating operating type revenues as contributions from capital funds to the operating fund balances for the respective service area. This item is before us for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony is closed. The item is before the
Move
body.
to approve.
Second.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is very impressive cleanup, it really is, and I'm really happy to see this. But my one question is it okay if we do this, considering the fact that it's state grants? Can we transfer state grants into our operating budget?
Through the chair, Ms. Jackson, we researched every single transaction as much as we possibly could so that we could determine and answer those questions. And based on the information we received, which the short answer is yes. Also, we talked with our bond counsel to make sure everything was okay there. But I would like to point out that the majority of these dollars are completely unidentifiable. They were not associated with projects. They were sitting in capital accounts and not associated with a project. And with SAP, that won't be allowed, which is really what was the driver for this analysis.
If I may continue, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
My big concern was it's capital funds, whether it's state grants or from any other source, being transferred into operating budget. And I was just curious. And my next comment is, so in other words, the fund balance for these service areas are going to be increased by these amounts. That's the understanding I get from reading the document.
That is correct.
That's excellent news. Thank you, Ms. Mahoney. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Starr.
Well, I concur, and Ms. Mahoney and I chatted just very briefly about it, and some of this money goes back into the 90s, so it's a long time ago, and I figure the diligence. Ms. Mahoney, specifically to Section 5 in my area, in Ms. Dombowski's, we've got the $864,000 going into roads in particular. I brought up earlier with the HLB property in particular that we just appropriated to sell. There's an interfund loan, and if the balance isn't paid off, if this restriction is put into the roads department and the money wasn't necessarily all roads. I've got other service areas out there, for example. I don't want to earmark it, but I want to do two things. I want to pay off outstanding debts, and I want to give tax relief with my money. Does anything in this action prevent us from doing that? Or does it stay in fund balance and we can still move it?
The only restriction is that it stay within the fund and the service area. And so, for example, for the Chugiak one, it needs to stay within the capital fund. And actually, I'm sorry, I misstated. It falls to fund balance. It's falling to fund balance to operating, so that way it can be designated to be used for anything.
Yeah, I guess anything in my case, though, you're sending it over to the Subursa, for example, on Section 5. So, we've had sort of challenges in our community taking Subursa money and spending it on parks and vice versa. You have found some appropriated dollars, $177,000, that can go to the Chugiak Parks Department. But let me ask you specifically, because my end game here is to pay off that interfund note if the sale of the HLB property doesn't cover it. So speaking out loud, I think that interfund loan that I talked to you about earlier isn't actually in either department. Does it reside with HLB then?
Hold on. I have it somewhere else.
This is a big topic. I'm happy if we have the comfort in the fund balance, but I don't want to appropriate the dollars to those and then have a...
Yeah, I mean, what I would need to do is look up all the different funds, and they just need to... We need to keep them in the right buckets, and I can't answer that off the top of my head.
Well,
but I will point one thing out, though, is once it falls to undesignated fund balance within that fund, you, the Assembly, you can move the money around, I believe, between funds as long as it stays in the same service area.
Well, that's my challenge, because I don't want to give it to the Subursa folks to pay off the library out there if in fact, it's HLB money. So I'll work it out with you later. I'm happy to get this money moving out of just general bank accounts that have been sitting idle for a long time and move it. So I'm urge approval for it, but it may have to be this process of reappropriation that you speak to, and we'll have to do that later. Thank you very much.
Yep. Mr. Honeman?
By the same token, I guess I'm going to ask if we could use some of this as fund balance extra for operating, perhaps to make up the difference in the SRO costs. Is that something that would be appropriate? We can use some of this funding to the police service area?
Excuse me, through the chair. The way the money is spent will be determined by you, the Assembly, and so that will be your decision. It will fall to fund balance, and then at first quarter budget, you'll be able to determine what to do.
Okay. And that's assuming that it's okay to do this, but it looks like it is?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14S, AR number 17, a resolution appropriating $1,122,431 of interest and penalties on assessments from the Special Assessment Bond Redemption Fund number 899 as contributions to the Anchorage Roads and Drainage Service Area 141, fund balance in the amount of $353,281, and an area-wide General Fund 101, fund balance in the amount of $769,150. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, testimony is closed. Items before the body. Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Motion carries unanimously. We have before us item 14T, AO number 4, an ordinance approving the letter of agreement between the Municipal of Anchorage and the Anchorage Municipal Employees Association regarding extending the negotiating committee. Item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony is closed. Items before the body.
Second, and Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Honeman.
Make a quick amendment on the AM, if I could.
Yes, sir.
And that is, it's on the back. I'm sorry. Let's see if I have it here. Looking at it earlier. No, I'm sorry. This is the wrong ordinance. I apologize. I stand corrected.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote.
I'm a little ahead.
That motion carries unanimously. We're at you. We now have before us item 14U, AO number 23, an ordinance to the Anchorage Assembly reducing the 30-day period for public review and comment on AR 2014-12, approving the letter of clarification between the Municipality of Anchorage and Anchorage Municipal Employees Association, modifying enrollment timing requirements for the initial quarter of the Performance Incentive Program. Item is before the body for action, or for testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, testimony is closed before the body for action.
Move to approve.
Got a motion and a second. No one in the queue. Please vote. That motion passes 8 or 9 in favor, 2 absent. We have before us item 14V, AR 12, a resolution approving a letter of clarification between the Municipality of Anchorage and Anchorage Municipal Employees Association, modifying enrollment timing requirements for the initial quarter of the Performance Incentive Program. Item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony is closed before the body for action.
Second.
Mr. Starr.
Ms. Usera, you were here in 2009, weren't you? How did we pick up on this action here that's correcting going back? It seems to be that, maybe I've misinterpreted, but we're correcting the date of start on some of these folks, I think. Is that what we're doing? How did we miss it?
Nancy Usera, Acting Director, Employee Relations. Through the Chair, Mr. Starr, when the PIP program was initiated, it was 2 years ago. The effective date that was in the contract, by the effective date that was in the contract, some of the forms for employees to be able to sign up weren't yet prepared. So there was a gap of a couple of months between the time that the forms were available and the sign-up period. What this does is those employees today are eligible for the program because it's a 2-year program before you can sign up. It's 8 quarters. So these employees are now being affected, and what this does is it says if you were enrolled from the period of time of the effective date and that gap before the forms were available that you qualified.
So we don't have to pay anybody a difference. It's just on accrual.
Yeah, this affects a couple of employees, and there's another one in here for one of the other unions that fell into the same boat.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Motion carries unanimously. We have now before us item 14W, AO number 24, an ordinance to the Anchorage Assembly reducing the 30-day period for public review and comment on AR 2014-15, approving the letter of clarification between the Municipality of Anchorage and the Public Employees Local 71, modifying enrollment timing requirements for the initial quarter of the Performance Step Program. Item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony is closed before the body for action.
Second.
No one in the queue, please vote. That motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14X, AR number 15, a resolution approving the letter of clarification between the municipality of Anchorage and Public Employees Local 71, modifying enrollment timing requirements for the initial quarters of the Performance Step Program. Item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony is closed before the body.
Move to approve.
Second.
No one in the queue, please vote.
Mr. Honeman?
That motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14Y, AR number 16, a resolution approving letters of agreement between APDEA 0013 between the municipality of Anchorage and the Anchorage Police Department Employees Association, resolving two grievances and clarifying contract language to conform to municipal practice. Item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, public testimony is closed.
Move to approve. And Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
I'd like to make an
Honeman.
amendment on the AM on the back.
Yes,
page,
Mr. Honeman.
Page number 2. Yes, I'm sure, Mr. Trainee. On the AM line 29, continuing on to the first section of 30, remove the words compensates employees for perceived losses in the past. So we'll just remove that line, and that was with discussion with the administration, and they're okay with that.
Second.
Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering, and I guess the question will be to you. Gosh, it's late. I forgot your name. Anyway, are there any more like grievances out there that we could or should be made aware of?
Through the chair, William Earnhardt, former assistant municipal attorney. I'm here tonight because I'm probably one of two people in the entire administration who actually understands this. We could do a work session on this, but no, there are no more in the line. This arises out of two grievances. The first one filed in 2009 prior to my tenure with the city. But what is clear is, and we don't feel that the city did anything wrong, but at the same time we have language in a contract that is unique to the APDEA contract that goes back to at least 1991. It involves several legal terms and as to calculating overtime that appears to be in conflict with the PeopleSoft programming that's existed since at least 1999. To compound it, there is an FLSA issue, the Federal Fair Labor Standards Act, basically for overtime, where Mr. Aitchison, long-term counsel for APDEA, has actually convinced a couple of courts outside this jurisdiction, not binding on us, but a couple of trial courts have actually accepted his argument. I think it's legally groundless, but obviously he's convinced a couple of people. All this goes into a situation, again, just unique to this contract, where we were looking at significant transaction costs. The amount of resources coming not from the legal department and defending it, this was set for September, we had the resources there, but from finance, from payroll, from other departments, the people, the time it would take them to get up to speed and try to calculate these damages going back 4 years, and it is literally, we had put in the AM perceived damages because, again, we don't think the administration did anything wrong. At the same time, if this error was made, there are damages of, and I say approximately $250,000. The resources it takes to go back, it would literally be individual by individual, paycheck by paycheck, reanalyzing the type of overtime. Is this something that's contractual overtime because it's over the shift, or is it over the 40-hour limit for FLSA, and recalculating that and putting in a whole different method of calculation. Also looking at the risks to the municipality, not only in those transaction costs, but going to an arbitration, which often is a crapshoot. Maybe we win, in which case we've spent about $250,000 arbitrating it. If we lose, or even split the baby, we have significant costs, not only in calculating damages, whatever is awarded to those employees, but on top of that, we would have the transaction costs of having to reprogram our payroll system on the fly. So looking at all this, this was a business decision, as is very often done, of looking at all the risks. This was spend $2 to save $2 and possibly save $6 or $8.
If I can follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that thorough explanation. And my question again is, so there are no other similar issues with any other department such as this?
No, that was one of the things we looked at very carefully, is the other contracts don't have this same language, which is problematic and is unique to the APDA contract.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Honeman.
I'm recommending approval. I certainly see that the agreement was very well thought out and such. The only portion that just being removed is the perceived word. And again, it goes back to it was reported, not perceived. So that's why we're here, had agreements. So that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Trini, you speaking to Mr. Honeman's amendment?
I'm sticking to it. It's just that in this case, they've got a good attorney outside that has been able to successfully convince some judges to approve this, and it's easier to cover losses and deal with this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No one in the queue. We're voting on the amendment that Mr. Honeman made. Please vote. Motion carries unanimously. We are now voting on the ordinance as amended, resolution as amended. Motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14AA, AO number 2, an ordinance to the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending the Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 2.30, Rules of Procedure for Assembly. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, Ms. Jackson, I'm assuming you're going to make testimony. Okay. Please, Ms. Jackson, make your motion.
Thank you. It's great, Jackson. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to move to postpone, to continue the public hearing to the meeting of February 11th.
Second.
And the reason why is because, first off, let me just say that we had a really, really good meeting with the Rules Committee and the Citizens Task Force, and there were several recommended changes, and our attorney did a really good job in developing a draft document. But we really, Mr. Train and I believe that it's really necessary before we put that substitute version out there is that we have another meeting with the Rules Committee, and Ms. Johnson agrees too, with the Rules Committee and the Citizens Task Force, and then we'll bring the substitute version back at the meeting of February 11th. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any objection? Hearing none, this will be continued to the meeting of February the 11th and testimony as well. We now have before us item 14AB, AO number 3, an ordinance to the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 2.40, providing for the establishment, recognition, duties, and responsibilities related to community councils in reference to Chapter Section 8.01. Item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify?
Good evening. My name is Merle Akers, and I'd like to talk just a minute about this process that this went through. Most of you, or maybe none of you, know this is Mr. Trainey and all have apparently put together a group of people to look over the present way this community councils operate under that ordinance and looking for changes. They invited a few people to attend to that, basically the community council presidents. I was in the room. I didn't realize at first that anybody else could participate. Finally, that kind of cleared up. I put in some suggestions. I wrote up some suggestions of what might help out with the community councils and maybe increase their membership and take care of some other things. That was pretty much just blown away in the meeting. Really, there was no way for me to engage the rest of the people in why they had their different positions they were taking. Some of the things that were very upsetting, of course, is that they were basically against term limits, and they were definitely against not letting people vote when they get to the meeting. They, especially where there was going to be an election of officers, they wanted to put all these restrictions on the community people attending meetings. I'm just going to, where I'm going with this, I think that the process was going fine. I think what happened here, that it got cut off a little too short. I think there should have been at least one more, maybe one more meeting on the way they were going at it, and people like myself should have been given some kind of an opportunity to be more engaged in the process. The one thing that I put out, I thought was because of some instances that I'm aware of, being a community council member and going many years, is I thought there should be a process whereby when the community councils got into a deadlock and you can't get by something, and one of the things I ran into was, as an example, the chair of the community council did not quit at the end of the term. They did not elect a new president, and so how do you resolve that issue without taking people to court? So I thought there should be something in the ordinance that provided a way for members of the public to have the councils, these kinds of issues, come before somebody to help them resolve it without going into litigation. So that's all I really have to say on this issue. I hope that you will. I'd like to see it be opened up a little more. I think there were some other boundary issues that should have been talked about and some other things. But that just didn't happen at this, coming into this at the early meetings. Thank you very much.
Mr. Trini has a question or comment.
Sure.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Akers.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Phil Isley, and I have a couple of concerns. The first one is what it takes to be a member of the Community Council. I normally attend the Spenard Community Council and the Turnagain Community Council because I live in Spenard, but Turnagain directly affects me. I have 2 airplanes on the airport. Turnagain handles the airport. I make my livelihood at the airport. I'm usually there anywhere from 4 to 7 days a week. But yet I have no vote in Turnagain because I'm not an independent business person there. I work for somebody that works at the airport. Although I have airplanes out there, I don't live in my airplanes, so that doesn't help me any. But their decisions have a significant impact on my life, and I don't get a vote for it. So I think that if you're invested in it somehow, you should make a mechanism there where if you're renting property in their area or you work in their area and you attend meetings more than just one time to come and vote, that you should be able to join that community council and have a say. My other concern is 16-year-olds. I understand what you're trying to do there and get younger people involved, but 16-year-olds typically don't have a developed sense of logic. If you look at insurance companies, they don't drop your insurance till you're 25. The reason they do that is because you don't make really good decisions until you're about 25 years of age. 16-year-olds typically don't make real good decisions because they don't have the experience and their brain is not fully developed yet. And studies everywhere prove that. And if you allow 16-year-olds to come to the council meetings, they can get in there, but they don't necessarily understand what they're doing or what the long-term effect of that would be. So if you're going to let them be a member, that's fine, but I don't think they should be a voting member. And then the last thing I have is on page 22. It says that a community council has to have at least 4 meetings a year, 1 in each quarter. And I was wondering if anybody could have one meeting in each quarter and have less than 4 meetings. I'd be curious to know.
Ms. Dembowski?
I will address your second point, Mr. Isley. This ordinance, if you work in the Turnagain area, you could actually be a member of the community council. If your employer, the person who owns the business, he can delegate his authority to you to be a member of that, to represent him. So, I mean, that's one avenue you could utilize.
So then if I quit that job there and I go over to the next hangar on the lake and get a job there, then I'd have to do the same with him, and 2 months later when I get tired of him and go to the next one?
Potentially. But
But what if they wanted to go and vote for their own thing and we disagreed on something?
Well, it's up to the business owner or the property owner in that area in order to represent them. So
you're saying that if I live there and I pay wages or pay my airplane tax of $75 a year for each airplane that I own, so forth and so on, that I'm not necessarily invested in that area, and
I didn't say that.
Well,
I'm just telling you how the code is currently, and the proposed changes.
I understand how the code is currently. For 3 years, I've been going to the Turnagain Community Council meeting and not getting a vote, probably for longer than that.
I was just trying to give you a simple, easy solution that you could affect.
Yeah, I've looked at that, and it's a way around it, but it doesn't address the issue, really. It just kind of skirts around it.
Sure. I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Mr. Horniman?
Yeah, Mr. Isley, this other point with the 16, you might be interested to know that courts can emancipate minors younger than that even, and they have pretty much all the legal rights that an adult would have, except perhaps drinking. Or the other thing is that the state law already says that at the age of 16, not that I agree with, but it says that they can quit school and they can also consent to have relations with another. So those are just some things at age 16 that they can do. So.
That could be a reason why we have so many troubles.
There's no other questions. Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Trainee.
Mr. Chairman, move continue this item until our meeting of February 11th.
Second.
Any objection from the body? Seeing, hearing none, this item will be continued to the meeting of February 11th. We have no other unfinished business before us. Do we have anyone for audience participation?
My name is Merle Akers, and I'm addressing you tonight on a couple of issues. One, I heard some of you were going to Juneau, so I just want to remind you that the Aviation Advisory Committee is meeting in Juneau, I think, on the 8th. So if you're down there, you want to pay attention to me, you want to take in that. You all have a representative on that board. His name is Mr. Straight. And I encourage you to find out what his mission is to such things as the mayor's task force to do this land exchange. Now, I'm not a member, I wasn't on the task force, but I've been going to the meetings, and that land exchange task force, to me, if it's not something done about it, you're going to have a real blow up in this community. I think the approach was wrong, and the way that we're going about it, what's the end result's going to be, it's going to tear this community apart again. Now, there was a better way, I think, to have done this thing. The mayor wants one parcel. He should have gone after that parcel and not thrown this whole thing open. Now, somebody there was a nice compass piece in the paper here a couple of weeks ago that you might have read. One of the non-participants on the task force wrote that, but it's right to the point. And you're up against a hard place because you've got the airport manager, a state staff person, saying to the city of Anchorage that he will not give them a long range, either a lease or way to use the property that the mayor is asking for that snow dump site without throwing up the coastal trail and everything else in the middle of this. I encourage you all to take a good hard look at that, and that meeting is down there. I think you ought to be heard, and people and your representative ought to be telling those state folks, let's settle this now. You haven't any reason for that piece of property. They have no justification for using the piece of property for any other reason, any other purpose. That's better than what the mayor has asked it to be used for. So holding it up, giving the mayor and the municipality not giving them that snow dump until they agree to give away the coastal trail, you're going to be in a world of hurt here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? The chair would take a motion to adjourn.